an outgoing and vivacious mother.
Everybody that met her loved her. She would make everyday fun.
She was vibrant, happy. She was the life of the party.
Is savagely murdered.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated.
Police hunt for an elusive killer.
We had nothing to tell us what happened. Crime scene evidence produced basically nothing.
We couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it. We were really baffled.
Could have been anybody.
And follow a twisted trail of evidence.
Why would he use a calling card?
There were 44 phone calls made up until the day of the murder.
The officer found a loaded handgun and hollow point bullets. It kind of lit up like a light bulb.
Until a desperate move.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case.
Reveals a secret that stuns everyone.
I was very surprised, I was shocked. All of us were. I never would have expected that it would lead to this.
At 10:27 p.m. on a cold Tuesday in January 2003, Ramapo Police Dispatch receives an emergency call.
Ramapo 911. My neighbor just ran in my house and said his wife is on the floor in the house. He's here and he's sort of in a state of shock.
Let me talk to him on the phone.
All right, hold on a minute.
Yes. Sir, I have help on the way. You stay right where you are until the officers get there. Do you know if your wife is breathing?
No. She didn't answer me.
Did you check to see if she was
breathing?
breathing?
I walked into her room. The lights don't go on.
Okay. Does she have any injuries?
Yes, she's got blood on her.
Where?
When I cried, Evelyn, she didn't move.
Did you come home and find her that
Yes,
way?
I just came home.
Officers are dispatched to the home, located in a quiet family neighborhood.
When I initially approached the house, I see a man with a young boy with this really blank face. Walking by, he didn't say anything to me. I noticed that he had a shopping bag. It looked like a gallon of milk. I enter the home and go upstairs to the back rear bedroom to give this woman aid, only to find that I was at the scene of a murder. Her injuries were so severe. She's clearly dead. She's a very deep laceration to her neck, and she has what appears to be a knife handle sticking out of her chest. And the blood is just pooled around her body. To me, it looked like the blood was still moving. And I was thinking to myself, this just happened. It could be that the killer's still in the house. So myself and another police officer went room by room and cleared the house, and we didn't find anybody else inside. At that point now, I had to secure the crime scene. I knew that it was dark, but once it's a crime scene, you try not to touch anything because you don't know what is evidence.
Detectives arrive on the scene and begin their investigation in the bedroom.
The victim was lying on her back, and she had a tremendously deep wound to her neck. So deep so, you could see part of her spine. There appeared to be 2 stab wounds to her chest, and there was a large, I would call it a kitchen knife, sticking in her chest. We, of course, dusted the knife for fingerprints, which came back negative.
The actual blade had gone through her and was stuck into the parquet wood floor. It was a pretty brutal scene.
She didn't appear to be dead for long. Her body was cold to the touch, but there was no rigor mortis. There was no lividity. We looked at a potential attack of a sexual nature. There was nothing obvious to the eye. Her clothing was not disturbed. I looked for any defensive wounds. If there was a struggle, there'd be some indication on her hands, and none of that was evident.
The brutality of her injuries and how many times she had been stabbed, it looked more like what we would call a crime of passion.
Looking around the room, investigators discover some unusual clues.
I found it kind of odd that there was no lights, but the fan in the ceiling was running. The fan light had no light bulbs in it. And in the garbage basket were 3 light bulbs, and there was one on the floor next to it. And I'm like, that just, what's this all about? And there was a wall sconce that had a light bulb that was loosened. To me, it would be indicative of somebody looking to hide their presence, lessen the ability of the victim to see them.
The house was a little bit in disarray, but it didn't look like it had been ransacked or that it was part of a burglary.
There was some expensive tools in the garage. There was quite a bit of silverware, which is a burglar. They would take that, I would think.
Nothing really of value was taken, and so that started raising more questions of what exactly happened here.
Police examined the exterior of the house for evidence.
We didn't see any types of breaks in the windows or the screens. Everything appeared to be locked and secure. On the ground, you could see a set of footprints in the snow that led to the back door. And that door wasn't broken open, but it was open just slightly. That could have been a point of entry for whoever had done this to her.
Investigators speak with the homeowner, Peter Visich. He tells police the victim is his wife, 36-year-old Evelyn Visich, and that they live in the house with their 2-year-old son, Ryan.
Peter told the police he'd gotten home with his son and that he observed that something happened to his wife. When the police spoke to Peter and explained to him what exactly happened to his wife, Evelyn, it was a strange reaction.
He just sort of had a very stale face. That was something that was odd to me, but it certainly didn't point any fingers at him. There was no blood and nothing in his hands or on him or on his clothes that would indicate that he had been part of the murder.
While Peter is taken to headquarters to make a statement, Ryan is looked after by his grandparents. At the crime scene, investigators continue to look for any clues to who has killed Evelyn Visich.
In these early stages, you don't really know the victim, and so now you have to start thinking, who would do that, and what was the reason for this brutality that was leveled against this victim?
Born to a single mother in Lares, Puerto Rico in 1966, Evelyn grew up determined to escape her humble childhood.
She came to this country from Puerto Rico when she was 19 to live the American dream.
Evelyn landed a job at a large home improvement store in Paramus, New Jersey, where she made an immediate impression.
Evelyn was a great employee. She had such a good work ethic. Everybody loved her.
She was vibrant, positive. You could hear Evelyn from a mile away. She was always happy. She loved her music. She was passionate about dancing. She was a proud Latina.
She was beautiful inside and out. Such a giving person. She was very kind.
Evelyn started dating Peter after they met at the store.
Peter used to shop there with his father. He was very quiet, very polite, family-oriented. He seemed like a good guy. Someone that she could see building a family with. That was her dream.
Peter and Evelyn married and soon welcomed their son Ryan into the family.
Ryan was her world. Everyone knew she had a son, and everyone knew how much she loved her son.
After 4 years of marriage, the couple's relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn filed for divorce.
Things started to go wrong. They were just very disconnected. But she wanted Peter to be a part of Ryan's life while they figured out their divorce and custody agreement.
But Evelyn was killed before the divorce was finalized, raising police suspicions due to the nature of her murder.
The ferocity, the level of violence, you would think somebody really had an axe to grind, someone that's personally involved with the victim.
You looked at the nature of the crime, it suggested that it was somebody doing this for a reason. You have a couple who are going through a divorce. In these types of cases, you're going to look at the husband.
Coming up, police discover additional suspects.
We learned that he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
Maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute.
And unearth hidden evidence.
Evelyn had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having.
But just as the investigation falters,
maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder because it just doesn't make sense.
Was there a piece of the puzzle that we weren't seeing?
A new face blows the case wide open.
He's perspiring heavily. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it.
Police investigating the murder of mother of one, Evelyn Visage, have their first suspect, her estranged husband, Peter Visage.
You have to start thinking, did the husband do this, or is he involved in it somehow?
Peter mentioned that his relationship with Evelyn was troubling to him because they were in a different place. He wanted her to stay home, she wanted to work, and the relationship deteriorated, and Evelyn had filed for divorce.
Evelyn and Peter still lived in the same home even though this divorce was proceeding. They slept in separate bedrooms, but they were living under the same roof.
Peter claims he last saw Evelyn alive the morning she was killed.
He had taken his son for the day. Evelyn had gone to work.
Peter told us he went to his mother's house at 8:30 that morning with Ryan to do some household repairs. He didn't have a steady job. His parents supported him. He also did a lot of odd jobs for them that they paid him for. He stayed at his mother's house till approximately 8:30, and at that time he went with his son Ryan to the Palisades Mall.
Peter tells police that just after 9 p.m., he called Evelyn's cell, and she told him she was at a friend's house.
She told Peter that she was on her way home and would probably be home within 20 minutes or so. At approximately 10 p.m., Peter received a telephone call from Evelyn asking where he was. Peter said to Evelyn that he was picking up milk and that he would be home shortly. Peter said that upon arriving home, his intent was to put Ryan to bed, but he said that he found it odd that the lights were not working in the hallway. He said he looked into the bedroom, he saw that Evelyn was on the floor, and he said that she was obviously deceased, according to him, and he ran back downstairs and ran to the neighbor's house to call the police.
Peter Visage was questioned for over 16 hours. I mean, it was a very long interview. He never asked to leave. He never said, I want a lawyer, leave me alone, anything like that. He was cooperative throughout.
He agreed to provide us with fingernail clippings, hair samples, blood sample, a buccal swab for his DNA.
As Peter is providing samples, investigators run a background check.
There was nothing in his history indicative of this violence. Peter was typically a guy who was, if he wasn't home, working on cars, motorcycles, he was at his parents' house. Peter Visage's mother confirmed his alibi for the day and evening at the time that he said that he was there. We found Peter to be at the A&P supermarket buying milk and exiting the store consistent with the times he described, confirmed by video cameras. And he produced a receipt for the milk, time and date stamped 10:15 p.m. The amount of time it took to go from A&P, where he purchased the milk, to his house, it just would not have been possible to commit that crime and call the police from the neighbor's phone and not be contaminated in some sort or leave behind some evidence or have evidence on him. We found no sign of any injuries. We found no sign of any blood on his person, on his shoes.
At this point in the investigation, there was nothing that we could find that was showing that Peter Visage was involved in the murder of his wife. He was in all these different places where there were surveillance cameras, and with a timeline that prevented him from being at the scene of the murder when it occurred. Now you have to start thinking, other than Peter Visage, who could do something like this, and why would they do something like this?
I asked him, did he have any concern about his own safety? If somebody came into your house, maybe they were looking for you too. Does he have any enemies? Does he owe anybody money? Does he have any illegal habits, drugs, gambling? And he answered no to all those questions. And I asked him if he knew anybody that might want to do this. And he said that she did have a boyfriend and that we should look at him. Evelyn was dating another employee of Home Depot, Mike Granda.
Here you have people going through a divorce, and now you have a boyfriend thrown into the mix.
A motive could be jealousy, could be a fight in their relationship. The fact that she still lives with Peter could be a source of upsetment for Mike Granda.
Maybe it was a jealous boyfriend who had come in there. It fit the profile for the crime scene, being that it was so horrific.
The next morning, police head to Evelyn's work to interview her boyfriend, Mike, and find that her coworkers already suspect something is wrong.
I remember I kept calling her because Evelyn was always at work by the time I got there. And she wasn't there that day. I saw detectives when they came in and I got suspicious. And I said, something happened to Evelyn, right? So the detective said to me, how would you know that? So what I said was, you just confirmed it to me.
We interviewed Evelyn's co-workers, and to a person, they all loved her and spoke highly of her. And she had some very close relationships with people that she worked with that loved her dearly, that she was good to them, they were good to her, they looked out for each other.
Evelyn was very, very loved at work. Emotionally, it was horrible. I mean, we were her friends. We were her family.
She wasn't just a friend, she was like a big sister to me.
As investigators speak with Evelyn's coworkers, her boyfriend, Mike Granda, arrives to start his shift.
When Mike Granda arrived for work, we told him that Evelyn had been murdered. He was visibly upset.
But when detectives ask Mike where he was the night before, his answer raises eyebrows.
According to Mike Granda, he had been with Evelyn the night of the murder.
At that point, you have to really look at every possibility. Maybe she was going back to her husband. Maybe she had broken up with him. Maybe it was a crime of passion. Maybe they were having a domestic argument, a dispute. We had to look at him as a possible suspect for the murder.
Police hunting the killer of Evelyn Visage are focusing in on the man she was dating while in the throes of divorcing her husband.
We did look at Evelyn's boyfriend, Mike Granda. There could be a source of jealousy based on the fact that she still lives with her husband during this process, so he has to be looked at.
Detectives bring the 28-year-old to the station for questioning.
When Michael Granda was interviewed, we asked him to describe their relationship. He said initially they were just friends, but as time went on, they became romantically involved and began dating.
Investigators press Mike for details on the night that Evelyn was killed.
According to Mike Granda, Evelyn and he had left Home Depot at approximately 3 p.m. Evelyn had gone to the Garden State Plaza Mall to return some clothes, and she actually was supposed to be having dinner with her son that night. But Peter called Evelyn and said, I'm going to my mother's house with the baby. So Evelyn called Michael saying that she was free, so she went from the shopping mall to Michael Granda's house in West New York, New Jersey.
Mike claims he and Evelyn had dinner. Around 9 p.m., Peter called to say he was on his way back with Ryan, after which Evelyn decided to head home to see her son.
Michael Granda's house is approximately a 40-minute drive to the Visage house. Michael Granda called her when she was approximately 20 minutes from home when she was on the Garden State Parkway. Approximately 40 minutes after that phone call, Evelyn was being murdered. We asked him to describe his whereabouts. He said that he had stayed home for the rest of the night, watched TV, and went to bed. So there was a window of opportunity where he did not have an alibi that could be corroborated by someone else. We subpoenaed his phone records to try to determine where he was. Michael's cell phone records indicated that his cell phone was in his apartment or very close by his apartment in West New York, New Jersey. If he were to drive from West New York, in all likelihood, he would have to pass through a toll. We subpoenaed toll records, Easy Pass records. We subpoenaed some cameras, video records from some banks in the area looking for his car passing by, and none of that was ever found. So that also led us to believe that he was telling the truth. He actually was in his home at the time that Evelyn was being murdered.
I never thought for 1 second that Mike had anything to do with it. Mike really lifted her up on a pedestal. He gave her that support that she needed. Mike made her feel beautiful.
Michael was most cooperative. He offered his phone. He offered his laptop computer. He offered samples of his blood, a buccal swab for DNA, hair. He offered everything. He said, please, I know you have to look at me, cross me off the list and find out who did this.
It just never even dawned on me that the police would look at me. I just tried to give them as much information as I could. I do remember telling them, like, oh, I know you guys have to suspect me, I told them if they wanted to search my house, they could. If they wanted to search my cars, they could. I was just very focused on trying to be helpful.
After the police obtained all the information from Mike and speaking with him and speaking with others, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect in the murder of Evelyn Visage. And there was just nothing to suggest that Peter Visage was involved. So if you don't believe the husband's involved, you don't believe the boyfriend's involved, you have to look at other individuals that may be involved.
At that point, could have been anybody. You can't make assumptions on who it could be. You have to really look at every possibility.
The day after Evelyn's murder, as police consider possible suspects, news of the crime hits the airwaves.
The Evelyn Visage murder was newsworthy just because of the area.
We're in a small town. We don't have that many murders that it's commonplace.
This was a case that really was troubling because you have a woman who was violently, brutally killed, and we couldn't figure out who did it and why they did it.
Hoping for a new lead, investigators looked to the autopsy report to learn more about the crime.
She had 2 stab wounds in her upper back area. Those were the initial strikes. And then she had a very deep slash wound to her throat. And then there were 2 stab wounds in her upper chest area, powerfully done as indicative by the fact that the knife was stuck in the floor. Based on what the medical examiner described to us, I could only imagine the sheer horror that Evelyn was experiencing.
The level of brutality that was involved in the actual murder was just shocking. Her throat was slashed almost to the point where she was decapitated. It was blood-curdling.
She must have been scared. Somebody's in her home, she's in her bedroom. Maybe it was a burglary gone bad and she came home and had startled whoever was in her house.
We circled back to examining parolees in the area, both New York and New Jersey, sex offenders, people that have committed similar crimes, burglaries gone bad or robberies gone bad. At the time of Evelyn Visage's murder, there was a group of young men who were committing robberies and burglaries in the vicinity, including a Terrence Monk, who lived approximately 5 miles from the Visage residence.
I do remember that we were having burglaries in the area, and I remember that we were having home invasions too. The name Terrence Monk, like it clicked with me.
There were cases, robberies, burglaries, and assaults where Terrence Monk committed violent acts on people that didn't cooperate. He was also implicated in a robbery probably 1.5 miles from the Visage house. It kind of lit up like a light bulb. He certainly went right up to the top of the list.
Evelyn Visage was killed in her own bedroom in a frenzied knife attack. And now, police are investigating if a violent local burglar might be responsible.
Terrence Monk was like a known criminal, and the detectives had been dealing with him for years at that point.
We had been investigating him so arduously, and for such a long time, there was not any possibility of cooperation on his behalf.
To get the information they need, investigators take a different approach.
I utilized a confidential informant to try to determine where Terrence Monk was and if in fact he was involved in this crime. He described to me where Terrence Monk was at the time that Evelyn was murdered. He told us that Terrence Monk was in Buffalo, New York, and that was substantiated by witness statements and his cell phone records.
It's another dead end for detectives. They press the informant for any other information that might help solve the case.
This young man was so plugged in the criminal community, so I asked him what the word on the street was. If it was a local guy, chances are, in the criminal community, somebody would have been talking. And he said there's nothing on the street at all. No information about who killed Evelyn Visage.
With no other leads, police re-canvass the neighborhood around the Visage home.
There was multiple attempts to locate witnesses, and detectives actually went back and conducted a road stop in the area, hoping that somebody may have seen something. Nothing was discovered, and we couldn't gain anything from that. In the village of Chestnut Ridge, it's prohibited to park a vehicle on the street at night. So we also checked to see if any parking tickets had been issued, or any vehicles parked on the street, and there were none found.
collectively, between the police and the prosecution, we were really sitting there thinking this may never get solved.
While investigators consider their next move, Evelyn's loved ones struggle to accept her loss.
I just couldn't believe that she was killed. Evelyn was such a loved person by everyone. Something like that happened to her. It makes no sense.
You know, there's some people that come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. That's what they say. There was a lot of respect and love there.
She would make like everyday fun, always laughing, having a good time. But, you know, that's life. I mean, you have to take every second you get because you never know when it's going to end.
Detectives re-interview Evelyn's friends and colleagues, hoping to uncover a tiny detail that leads them to her killer.
We did speak to many of Evelyn's friends to find out if she had a lifestyle that was potentially dangerous to her or would expose her to this type of demise.
Her life revolved around her being a mother.
She had no enemies.
Everybody that met her loved her. There was not one person that met her that did not instantly take to her. She was just a really pleasant person to be around all the time, day and night.
It was very puzzling. What happened and why was this done?
With a violent killer still on the streets, concern spreads through the community.
In this area, this little hamlet of Chestnut Ridge, it's just not that kind of an area where you would expect anything like this. People in the community are starting to get fearful.
I remember I was living alone, and I certainly had my radar up, and I was very careful coming and going, almost to the point of paranoia. I wasn't going to be a victim.
3 days after Evelyn's murder, detectives receive explosive new information, turning the investigation on its head.
Mike Granda came to the Round Pole police station with some personal items of Evelyn Visage's. Amongst those personal items, we found audio tapes and a journal that she wrote in.
Detectives immediately recognized the voices on the audio tapes as Evelyn and her husband Peter.
Evelyn apparently had secretly audio taped some of the arguments and fights that they had been having. Everything from any money that she spent, taking the car away from her, shutting off her phone. He wanted to be completely in control of Evelyn, so it was in stark contrast to what Peter described to us. The fact that Peter didn't describe any turmoil caused us to have some doubts about how truthful he was being.
Evelyn's journal contains even more startling revelations about their divorce.
He wanted custody. He was told that he wasn't going to get full custody, and he wanted the sale of the house. So if Evelyn is gone, he's got the child, he's got the sale of the house, and he can move on.
When detectives try to follow up with Peter about these revelations, they're met with silence.
At this point, Peter had retained an attorney, and we were no longer able to question him. So that again raised some suspicion. We went back and looked harder at Peter, based on the fact that he had the most to gain from Evelyn being dead.
With Peter having an ironclad alibi, investigators consider other scenarios.
Maybe he wasn't the one who actually did the murder, but you have to wonder if somehow Peter is involved in this, because it just doesn't make sense that anybody else had a reason to do this.
The suspicion is enough to get a warrant to search Peter's vehicle.
We had no idea at the time that that search of the van was about to unleash a whole new avenue of this investigation and turn this case totally upside down.
New evidence in the Evelyn Visage homicide investigation has led police to revisit her husband, Peter, as a potential suspect, and they are now searching his vehicle for any trace of incriminating evidence.
You just never know what might be that little piece. You know, whether it's a hair or a fingerprint or that one bit of DNA might be the break in the case.
Desperate for any lead in their investigation, police make a critical discovery.
There was an extensive search of Peter's van, and we uncovered in the back pocket of the middle seat of the van $3,700 in cash in a white envelope. In addition to the money that was found, there was a Sprint calling card.
This was tremendous evidence that we have just now uncovered. It offered a lot of questions.
Why would a person have $3,700 cash? We examined Peter's financial status. At the time, Peter was not very solvent in terms of having any money. Somebody who's, by all accounts, broke, and he's got $3,700 in the back of his van. And of course, we couldn't ask him why, because he had already retained counsel.
You have to now start wondering, why does this man have $3,700 in $100 bills left behind in his minivan?
It's possible that Peter may have engaged someone to kill Evelyn, and that money was going to be used to pay off the final payment.
Furthest thing from my mind was that a hitman could have been hired. That's really very rare in real life. Let's look at his bank accounts, his credit card statements, things like that, as far as getting any solid evidence he was involved in this.
We went back and looked harder at Peter's bank accounts, stock market, anything like that, in an effort to see if he had taken any money out to try to pay somebody to maybe do this, and nothing was found to be out of the ordinary or even considered to be like a payoff.
Finding no evidence Peter paid to have Evelyn killed, detectives focus on the other item found in his van.
Why would he use a calling card? Most folks, unless you don't have a cell phone or don't have a landline, don't have the necessity for a calling card. And Peter had a cell phone, he had a home phone, so we subpoenaed the records for that calling card.
There were 44 phone calls made from that prepaid phone card records beginning in November of 2002 up until the day of the murder in January of 2003.
Of 44 calls made on that card, almost all of them were made to an individual named Frank Thon.
The name is new to detectives, but when they run it through the police database, they make a telling discovery.
Police learned that Frank Thon was currently, at the time, in jail in the state of New Jersey.
This is a man who's been arrested numerous times, assaults, violent assaults. His most recent arrest was for driving while intoxicated. The officer found a loaded handgun underneath the armrest of the truck and hollow point bullets. At the time of the murder, he was on intensive supervised parole. Shortly after the Visage homicide, Frank Thon turned himself in to serve a year in the county jail.
Could there be an innocent explanation why Peter called a known violent criminal for months leading up to the murder, only to stop the day Evelyn was killed?
We subpoenaed Frank Thon's phone records. Analyzing his phone records, we found that he was in the vicinity of the Visage home on January 6th, the day before the murder, and on January 7th, the day of the murder. Then it became really evident to us that he was involved in this.
So now things are starting to click. We were able to secure a search warrant to search Frank Thon's apartment. And one of the things that the police recovered was a computer. Upon forensic investigation of that computer, we found that Frank Thon had searched directions from his apartment to the Visage home.
The evidence is compelling, but investigators need something more concrete to lay charges.
Based on the evidence that we had, it still was a very weak case. We don't have any forensic evidence that would connect him to the murder of Evelyn Visage.
You need the probable cause, you need the connection to prove your case and to actually have it stick.
With little else to go on, detectives make a bold decision.
We had no other option other than to go at Frank Thon. We knew our case would depend upon Frank Thon making a confession.
This was really the one shot that the police had to solve this case. It was a huge gamble because if he decided to ask for a lawyer, they could not question him anymore. If he denied it, they were stuck with what he had to say.
Police can only hope that Frank reveals the truth of whether Peter was involved in the murder.
We don't have a case against Peter. We're getting closer to figuring out maybe what occurred, but again, it doesn't prove that Peter Visage had any relationship to this murder.
We had nothing other than just the fact that Peter is calling Frank Thon. This case is going to rise and fall, whether we succeed or not with an interview.
Investigators head to the county jail to confront the hardened criminal.
I specifically requested a small room where we could have the table against the wall, and we deliberately set that room up to increase Frank Thon's anxiety. We had lawyer boxes with Evelyn Visich's name on the boxes. We had maps with pins in them. The small office was full of, as I call it, a number of props.
With everything in place, police bring in 41-year-old Frank Thon.
They took the handcuffs off him, and we pretty much just stared at him for like a good minute or two, again in an attempt to increase his anxiety. And he was visibly nervous. And I said to him, I said, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I already know what happened, and I'm going to prove it. And I'm going to tell you what, a murder for hire in New York, you could potentially face the death penalty. We told him that we had all types of evidence implicating him, and his face hit the table. He's perspiring heavily. His heart rate was obviously increased. I could see the vein in his neck beating. And I said to him, I said, you don't have any friends in this world right now. I said, if you tell us the truth, we'll try to assist you in getting the best possible deal. There was a long pause. He took a big sigh, and then he began to tell us what happened.
Four weeks after the murder of Evelyn Visich, investigators have just convinced suspected hitman Frank Thon to start talking.
He almost had a look of detachment from what was going on. He took a big sigh and he says, all right, I'll tell you guys what happened. Frank Thon told us that he was the person who killed Evelyn.
Frank Thon confessed not only to the murder of Evelyn Visich, but that he was hired by her husband, Peter.
I really was surprised after everything was said and done, after all of the investigative leads, that it all came back to Peter.
Frank tells detectives that he was introduced to Peter 3 months ago through a mutual acquaintance.
Peter asked this gentleman if he knew of anybody that could take care of his wife. Frank Thon requested $10,000 cash, with $5,000 being paid up front. We later learned that Peter obtained money from a friend of a friend on a loan. A short time after that, Peter Visich met Frank Thon at a pizzeria where Peter gave Frank the down payment of $5,000 cash. I looked at the money found in the van as this could have been the final payment.
To hear that for such a small amount of money that somebody was willing to go out there and kill someone, I was shocked and disgusted.
In his confession, Frank describes Peter's impatience to have Evelyn killed.
He told me that he had a second envelope ready. He was really pushing it.
Peter Visich was pestering him to get this done, so he decided January 7th was going to be the night.
Frank meets Peter at the Visich home the day before the murder.
He told me to lay out of the house and I'd be able to walk to the back of the house and he would leave a door unlocked for me.
Peter told Frank that he would leave the back door open, and he gave Evelyn's schedule for that day.
The next day, Peter establishes his alibi.
He went to his mother's house and then the shopping mall and then stopping to get milk. He knows that there's video cameras. He knows that he's going to get a receipt. That's all adding time to his alibi that can also be substantiated.
After sunset, Frank enters the Visich house and removes the light bulbs to lie in wait for Evelyn in the dark.
Garage door open. Then I heard the house door open. Then I heard her coming up the stairs, and that's when I came out of the room.
He had a gun. He pushed her into the bedroom, had her kneel on the bed, and he told her he was merely here to do a robbery and he wasn't going to hurt her. He said he then took a knife that he had brought with him and stabbed her twice in the back.
She dropped to her knees from the bed. She slid down. And now what do you do? I took her by the forehead from behind her. I sliced in, then I sliced back. I heard her bleed. Scratched the bone. I recognized the sound. She dropped immediately to my right on the floor. I heard the air leaving her body. I stabbed her 2 or 3 more times in the chest.
Do you leave the knife behind?
Yes, I did.
Where did you leave it?
Stuck in the chest.
Frank Thon was the instrument of Evelyn's death. But Peter Visich brought that instrument into his own home.
On Valentine's Day, 2003, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Peter Visich.
Police rushed to take Peter into custody.
I said, Peter, I have very good news for you. He said, what's that? He was somewhat befuddled. I said, we found out who killed your wife. And he became like almost giggly. He's like, really, who? I said, you did, expletive. You're under arrest.
It angers me and it pains me to think that the person that she married was the one that did that to her. It's shocking. It's sad.
I was very surprised. Like, I was shocked. All of us were.
He went through this elaborate murder, and I just thought, like, how pathetic are you as a person?
Frank Thon pleads guilty for his role in the murder of Evelyn.
In exchange for his cooperation, he was promised a sentence of 20 years to life if he testified truthfully at the trial of Peter Visich.
In November of 2003, in front of a packed courtroom, Peter stands trial for plotting to murder Evelyn.
Evelyn's friends and family were throughout the trial present. They had to endure really gut-wrenching testimony, particularly when Frank Thon testified.
He said that he told her at the end, I'm going to put you out of your misery. And your husband was the one that hired me. She was just in shock.
Peter Visich never takes the stand during the 8-day trial.
He showed no emotion the whole entire trial.
I would look at him and then just think to myself, like, why you had to get to that point? Why did you do it?
After hearing the evidence, the jury deliberates for only 3 hours.
The jurors announced that they did have a unanimous verdict, guilty on each and every count, including murder in the first degree, which carried a life without parole sentence.
We all screamed. We were relieved, and we felt like justice had been served, although it was bittersweet.
It's just so hard to comprehend why. Now the child doesn't have a mom or dad.
What he did to Ryan is just as unforgivable as what he did to Evelyn, because he deprived Ryan of one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met in my life. I've never met anyone like Evelyn.
For those closest to Evelyn, she remains alive in their hearts.
Evelyn is still here with us. She's still in our spirit. She was full of love. She was full of life. She was the life of the party.
She was always happy. And if you weren't happy next to her, she would have made you happy. She was a good soul. She was a good person. She will always be missed.
A beloved former school teacher and wife of a small-town mayor.
Charlotte was very compassionate about students and very well liked.
She was a wonderful mother.
Found murdered in her home.
It inflamed the community because of how popular she was.
Detectives find evidence of a violent struggle.
She had been savagely attacked.
You could see that her wrist was broke.
Who would kill this loving wife and mother?
There was nobody that you could think of that would want her dead. It's going to be one of those cases of a whodunit.
Suspicions run rampant in this small town.
People are trying to help the police crack this case, but it's just all of these rumors and innuendo.
Somebody that was at a party bragging about killing Charlotte.
He was spending money like it was going out of style.
A lady reported that her boyfriend tried to strangle her. We're thinking that's a very good suspect.
Police close in, but a public accusation upends the case.
He gave a statement on live radio accusing him of the murder.
They said they finally realized who killed her.
He was in shock.
I never would have expected them to be a suspect that will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Lanett, Alabama, a small family-oriented town in the heart of the Deep South.
Lanett was a mill town. It sits right on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, one of Alabama's major waterways. I always felt safe when I was there.
Some people would leave their homes unlocked, but we just never had any crime there.
Lanett is a very tight-knit area. Everybody knows everybody here.
August 4th, 1998 was a lazy summer day in Lanett until the peace was shattered by a 911 call.
It was around 5:30 when we got the call of an unresponsive woman.
Police are surprised to learn the call has come from the home of the town's mayor.
Everyone was shocked that it was their house, and I was there within 2 or 3 minutes.
The 911 caller, Heather Waits, leads police inside to her unresponsive mother.
Heather was very hysterical, and the first thing she could say was, "Help my mom." The first thing I did was go and check for a pulse, and she was cool to the touch. And you could tell that she's been expired for a little while.
Police are stunned to find Charlotte Waits, the wife of the town's mayor, dead in her home. At first, it appears that Charlotte has suffered a tragic accident.
We noticed she did have a little foam coming out the corner of her mouth, so we thought that, maybe had a seizure or a reaction to a medicine.
As detectives look closer, they begin to suspect foul play.
There was red flags that this was more than just an accident.
Her right arm and the wrist area appeared to be broken. She had what appeared to be scratch marks on the bottom of her chin, and she had some red markings around her neck. We made a decision right then that we're going to proceed with a homicide investigation.
Detectives find signs of a violent struggle.
There was a picture that had been knocked off the wall. We could see the nail that was holding that picture up was bent down towards the stairway. So my theory is that it was a fight coming down the stairs.
It just looked suspicious. The fact that her purse was dumped over, but her purse was still there. You couldn't tell if it was a stage scene or if somebody had come in and she had interrupted a burglary.
Was Charlotte the victim of a robbery gone wrong, or did her killer want it to appear that way?
We didn't see any signs of forced entry. One of the investigators went to the utility room and found 2 bloody towels. So we want to find out who might have bled on those towels.
As forensics collect evidence, Charlotte's husband, Barry, arrives on the scene.
Barry worked at the National Guard Armory. At the time, Barry was the acting mayor.
The look on his face, he was in shock. He was very, very upset.
He started hyperventilating, grabbing his chest. He began to go into what we thought was a heart attack.
As Barry is rushed to the hospital, news of Charlotte's murder spreads.
I remember the state of shock that I felt when I got down there to the emergency room. The girls were there, and of course they were upset. Their mother was dead, and their daddy was under a doctor's care for heart issues.
Investigators turn to Charlotte's daughters for information about their mother.
Charlotte was a very kind, gentle person, always smiling, and cared about others.
Charlotte studied education at Auburn University and got married to Barry Waits right after graduating in 1971.
She was a second-grade teacher. She was very compassionate about her students and just very well liked.
Later, Charlotte became a devoted school administrator.
She was genuine through and through. She just made such a nice reputation for herself in the school system and in the community as well. Barry was head of the National Guard Armory, and he would often let us use the armory for the science fair, social studies fair. And Charlotte, she was always there helping me with everything.
Charlotte and Barry had the perfect marriage. 2 great careers, and they had 2 daughters. Heather was going to college, and Kara was still in high school, getting ready to graduate.
When you was around them, you could feel the love. They were well respected in this community.
Charlotte was a wonderful mother. I could tell what a deep love she had for her family.
Who would take the life of this kind and caring woman, and why? Detectives question Heather about how she came to find her mother's body.
Heather came home for the weekend. As a college kid, it's time to get your clothes washed and get some good home cooking.
Heather said she came into the house, and then when she called out for her mom, and that's when she noticed her mom at the bottom of the stairs. And when she run up to her, she realized that she wasn't breathing.
And when she felt cold, she began to panic. And then that's when she called the ambulance. And then she called her dad.
Police are eager to question the mayor, but doctors say they want to keep him overnight for observation.
We did find out that he didn't have a heart attack. It was an anxiety type situation. But we were never able to talk to Barry while he was in the hospital. He got out the next day. On Saturday morning following the murder, we were at the office, myself, the other investigators, and then all of a sudden Barry walks in.
When it's this type of murder, it's usually someone very close to him at the same time. Nobody would ever suspect the mayor of doing anything like this. Anyone that knew Barry knew that he's like a big teddy bear.
My knowledge of Barry at that point, I'd never seen him upset. He was just friendly and well respected. Barry didn't fit any kind of profile to do this kind of crime. But we did take the opportunity to just look over him while we were talking to him, see if we could see any visible injuries, and we could not.
Barry offers to help with the investigation and agrees to be interviewed. Detectives ask him for his whereabouts the previous day.
He told us that the morning he had gone to the armory, just had a normal day. Around 11 or so, he left the armory and gone by the barbershop. He said it was full, so he went back to work the rest of the day until he received a phone call from his daughter telling him that she had found her mother. So he rushed home.
Investigators hope to verify the mayor's alibi, but they haven't established a clear timeline for Charlotte's murder.
The first day of business after the homicide, the only thing we had was a victim in a neighborhood that these things don't happen. It's going to be one of those cases of a whodunit.
Nobody disliked Miss Waits, and there was definitely nobody that you could think of that would want her dead.
As fear grips the town of Lynette, suspicion starts to fall on someone close to Charlotte's daughter.
Through talking to family, we had learned that Kara was dating a boy that her parents really didn't like because he was living a rough life, hand to mouth. Barry and Charlotte both told her that she was not going to see him. And then, of course, they learned that she was seeing him behind their back. At the time of the murder, Kara was still in high school and she was pregnant. I believe that Charlotte knew that Kara was pregnant.
Investigators wonder if there had been a deadly confrontation between Charlotte and her daughter's lover.
People have been killed for less. Maybe he thought, hey, I want to see your daughter, you're not letting me, so you're going to pay for it.
Coming up, the list of suspects grows.
People start calling the tip lines or saying, well, so-and-so told me so-and-so.
And small-town secrets are revealed.
He had been to prison for violent crimes.
People are starting to say, you're maybe not the person we thought that you were.
Then, new evidence stuns investigators.
He's got a money issue, and that's a flag.
But the prints did not match.
I can't put this behind me until it's solved.
You may think that you know who did the crime, but you may be wrong.
Just 24 hours into the investigation of Charlotte Waite's murder, police have their first suspect. Her 17-year-old daughter's boyfriend.
We had learned that at the time of the murder, Kara was pregnant.
Her boyfriend just wasn't the person that they wanted their daughter to be dating. So maybe there had been some type of conflict.
Police bring him into the station for questioning.
He told us that he knew that Barry and Charlotte didn't like him, but he said that the day of the murder, he was working with a grass cutting crew somewhere. We were able to go to the person that he was working for that day, and they verified his whereabouts through the entire day of the murder.
With Kara's boyfriend looking unlikely as the killer, detectives take a closer look at Kara.
The day of the murder of Kara, we determined that she was at work babysitting. Then we started looking at Heather. We were able to show that she was at Auburn University. She had actually left 20, 30 minutes prior to finding her mother. We eliminated her.
It's been less than 2 days since Charlotte Waits was found dead, and the investigation is under intense scrutiny from the public and the media.
We did have a lot of pressure put on us from the beginning because it's the mayor's wife. He's a pillar of the community and she's a pillar of the community.
With this case being such a high-profile nature, there was a lot of eyes looking at us.
I was the host of the morning show on WRLD radio. We were getting calls from people all over the county. I knew Charlotte's family real well. There was so much speculation at the time.
Under the close watch of the media, police turn their attention back to the mayor's alibi.
On any homicide, when your victim is married, you will start inside and then you work your way out. We wanted to find out the timeline of his whereabouts to eliminate him as being a suspect.
Barry claims that on the day of the murder, he left work around 11:30 a.m. to run an errand, then returned.
Barry said that once he got back to the armory, that he sent a fax to his commander. We traveled to Birmingham to verify who he sent the fax to, and it showed us that Barry got back to the armory at the time that he said he did.
Police confirm Barry's fax receipt has a 12:30 p.m. timestamp, but investigators still don't know the exact time of Charlotte's murder. While they wait for the autopsy results, they hope Charlotte's coworkers can help provide the answer.
The people that Charlotte worked with told us that Charlotte had gotten to work that morning, and that afternoon they were having a baby shower for one of her coworkers. They told us that she left around 11 or so.
And she comes home to get fixed up to go out to the little baby shower.
They told us that they were getting ready to order out lunch and tried to get in touch with her to find out what she wanted. Couldn't get an answer.
No one saw Charlotte again until Heather discovered her body nearly 6 hours later.
Our office was horrified. We just couldn't wrap our minds around the fact that our little ray of sunshine was dead. Sergeant Richard Carter was asking us a lot of questions, like, did Charlotte and Barry get along? Charlotte and Barry were always teasing with each other, and he was always being silly and funny, and she would roll her eyes at him, and they didn't appear to have any problems. We said what a wonderful husband he had been, and what a good daddy.
Investigators hope to get more information about Barry and Charlotte's relationship from their daughters.
We want to find out more about the dynamics of the family. But when the daughters realized that we were looking at their father as the suspect, they became upset with us. So they broke contact, and we've lost contact with them. When we were speaking to her friends and her family, nobody could provide anyone who could have a reason to kill Charlotte.
Hitting dead ends, investigators dig deeper and begin to look beyond Charlotte's immediate family. They request an interview with her brother, Gene.
Gene said he loved his sister tremendously, and her entire family. He talked about him and Barry being like brothers.
Then, Gene reveals a key piece of information.
Charlotte had an uncle that had passed away, written into the inheritance. Charlotte got 50%.
And we're talking several hundred acres here, which is worth a good bit of money. At this time, they're starting to build auto manufacturing areas here, and you can get lots of money for selling land or land rights.
Gene tells police that the inheritance caused problems in the extended family.
There was this cousin who felt like he deserved part of that estate. So he was contesting the will.
I've actually had to try murder cases where people have shot each other over property lines, and that's nothing compared to thousands and thousands of dollars worth of property. And so you've got heightened tension.
Gene also tells investigators that Charlotte was due to meet her attorney about the inheritance on the day she was killed.
We don't believe in coincidence that on the day she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney is the day that she was murdered. And at that point, Charlotte's cousin became suspect number one.
Detectives investigating the murder of Charlotte Waits have discovered she was about to inherit a large tract of land from her uncle, leaving another family member angry.
Charlotte's cousin, Wayne Rice, felt that he was entitled to part of it, and we're talking a substantial good bit of property.
She did not like conflict, and the day of the murder, she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney. Of course, she never made the meeting.
Detectives want to know if Wayne went to Charlotte's home to confront her before the meeting.
Maybe he thought if she was eliminated, he would have more opportunity for him to get more money out of it. When we contacted Wayne, he agreed to meet with us, but not without his attorney present.
Police ask Wayne how he feels about being left out of the family inheritance.
He knew that disputing that will caused broken relationships, but he said that he didn't wish any ill will on Charlotte.
Investigators ask for his whereabouts on the day of the murder.
Wayne had told us that he had gone to work early that morning. He'd gotten off work, gone home. We wanted to find out, did he have any opportunity to come to Lynette, commit the murder, and leave with nobody seeing him. We talked to 3 of his co-workers, and they confirmed that he never left. Didn't even leave for lunch.
With Wayne ruled out, police go back to the drawing board.
Once we were able to eliminate Wayne, we were kind of left again at point A. Who could commit this crime and leave and nobody see anything out of the ordinary?
2 weeks after Charlotte's murder, detectives received the autopsy report.
The pathologist explained that it was a strangulation.
The report concludes that the murder weapon was a piece of Charlotte's own clothing.
Miss Waits had on a blouse that kind of had the little strings that went across it, and those strings actually created the ligature mark around her neck. And we were pulled from behind.
The autopsy also confirms that Charlotte suffered other injuries in the attack.
She was thrown to the floor in such a violent manner that she suffered a dislocated wrist and the head injury that by itself could have killed her.
And the report suggests that Charlotte was struck in the face.
The doctor felt like she was punched, which could have subdued her.
The blood on the towels found at the scene is identified as Charlotte's.
The bloody towels were kind of stuck down in the bottom and covered up, like somebody was trying to hide them.
I would have to describe the last few minutes of Charlotte's life as complete terror. She had been savagely attacked.
Police receive the crime scene fingerprint analysis and discover a print that doesn't belong.
And we get the fingerprint report back, and then there's some unidentified fingerprints. We can't put a suspect with those fingerprints.
Police run the prints through the Alabama State Database, but it doesn't produce a match.
This is so frustrating because you owe it to the victim's family to go make that arrest and always hoping that we're going to get that silver bullet that's going to put it all together, and you never get it.
Then, just a few days later, a local report of a violent assault draws detectives' attention.
Our patrol guys got a call one night to a residence in regards to a lady that called and reported that her boyfriend, Rodney Borum, tried to strangle her. When the officer wrote up the report, he said, "This looks awfully familiar to the case that you're working on."
Detectives interview the victim and are struck by the similarities in the attack.
She reported to the police officers that her boyfriend attacked her from behind, tried to strangle her, but she was able to get away from him.
We knew Miss Waits had been choked from behind, so you have to look at that.
Is this an isolated case or an ongoing pattern of violent attacks?
We realized that he had actually had a pretty extensive criminal history from another state. He had been to prison numerous times for violent type crimes. So we were extremely interested in Rodney.
Police obtain Rodney's prints from the Georgia State database.
We sent those off to the crime lab to compare with the prints that were lifted at the crime scene. When we spoke to Rodney, it was explained to him that this crime looked a lot like what took place with Charlotte. So he knew without a doubt why we were questioning him.
As police look into Rodney's claim that he was working on the day of the murder, the lab comes back with fingerprint results.
We got notified that Rodney Boyd's prints did not match. And through his alibi, we were able to eliminate him from being in the area that day.
Police can't charge Rodney for the alleged assault on his girlfriend due to lack of evidence, so they let him go. Once again, the investigation hits a dead end.
You have to keep an open mind. Always be ready for something that's going to take you down a different path.
A few days later, a stunning piece of information comes in on the police tip line.
We'd gotten a tip that there was a man at a party bragging about killing Charlotte.
The tipster claims he overheard someone named Kenny Boyd confess to the crime.
He said that he had been at a party with Kenny Boyd and that Kenny Boyd had told him that he had gone in to rob Miss Waits and that she caught him burglarizing the house.
We thought this is what we needed. This is the tip that we need that's going to get us where we need to be.
When police go to locate Kenny, they don't have to look very far.
When we went and found him, he was inside our county jail.
It's been almost 2 months since the murder of Charlotte Waits, and a witness claims he recently overheard Kenny Boyd confess to the crime.
We were told that Kenny Boyd was at a party bragging about killing Charlotte.
The witness also tells police that Kenny had an accomplice.
Kenny told them that they were breaking in Charlotte's house. Then Charlotte came home. They jumped her, killed her. Didn't mean to kill her, but did.
The two suspects are well known to police.
They were always in trouble, in and out of jail.
Detectives head to Lynette County Jail, where Kenny has been in custody for several days on an unrelated charge.
We got inside the jail, sat down in a cell, began interviewing Kenny Boyd. He said he didn't know her, and he said he did not commit the murder. He said, I don't even know where they live, but we want to find out what it was he did that day. Kenny begins to tell us that they are out going to a local store stealing cigarettes, and then they're going into a different part of town selling them for crack.
Detectives are skeptical of the account and want to hear what Kenny's partner in crime has to say.
We find out that the other suspect's in prison in Georgia. So we traveled into Georgia, and he tells us basically the same story. He says, yeah, we were stealing cigarettes.
With identical stories from two suspects, investigators look to confirm their alibi.
To verify his alibi, the only thing we can do is go to the store that he said that they were stealing cigarettes from.
Police search the store's security footage for proof the men were there.
At the time of the murder, it was documented on video that they are inside that store that he said they were in. It was very frustrating. You may think that you know who did the crime, but you may be wrong.
Later on, we found out the guy that had called the tip line on Kenny Boyd just basically didn't like Mr. Boyd.
Police are increasingly concerned that the tip line may be doing more harm than good.
That's the thing about a small town, and everybody knows everybody, and people start calling the tip lines saying, well, so-and-so told me so-and-so.
Through this entire case, we would continually get tips. At times we felt like they were good tips, credible. Other times we knew that they were just trying to meddle in the case. The hardest thing was all the different rabbit trails that we kept having to go down because every single tip that we got, we had to chase it.
That's slowing the investigation down to a crawl because at a trial, you've got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody committed this crime. And to do that, you've got to disprove all of these bad tips and the rumors and innuendo.
With the investigation at a standstill, the public is increasingly angry that no arrest has been made in the 6 months since Charlotte's murder.
The people in this community were frightened. Any murder in a small town, people here know everybody, so you got a lot of pressure when you got a case like this.
The fact that Charlotte was so well known inflamed the community. I think there was a lot of angst because of how popular she was and how gentle she was.
My heart still ached. It was awful. I would go to her grave and wonder if your murderer comes here and looks. And at this grave, she was my dear friend. And I can't put this behind me until it's solved.
The pressure never lessened on this case. The community demanded that somebody gets brought to justice on this case.
As months turn into years without justice being served, Charlotte's loved ones carry on as best they can. Barry Waits is no longer mayor, but he continues to serve on Lynette City Council. His daughters, Heather and Kara, have both moved out of town.
The girls went on with their lives. Heather got married, and Barry moved on with his life. And he eventually remarried.
Every investigator always has one case that stays with them. You go to bed with it, you wake up with it. I never considered it a cold case because it always sat on my desk. It consumed you, especially in a small town, when you know the people involved.
3 years after Charlotte's murder, a bizarre development puts the case back in the spotlight.
Barry was on our city council, and Barry decided to run for re-election. Well, there was a gentleman who lived in the county who decided to run against Barry.
The person running for city council against Barry Waits at that time, his name was Rod Spraggins.
Rod was a bail bondsman. He was very well known throughout the community.
While on the campaign trail, Rod Spraggins makes a stunning statement in the local press.
Rod was quoted in the paper as saying that he was 100% convinced that Barry Waits had killed Charlotte.
Three years after the murder of Charlotte Waits, Rod Spraggins has publicly declared that he knows who killed her.
Rod said Charlotte came to me in a dream and told me that Barry's the one that killed her.
Rod Spraggins gave a statement on live radio accusing Barry of the murder. And we got a lot of calls on that, you know. You got people openly saying it on the radio. Why can't y'all make an arrest?
Rod's comments raise eyebrows, but police are suspicious of his motives.
I think it might not have been taken as seriously knowing it was Rod.
Rod Spraggins he's a con man. One of those that just stirred up stuff. And I don't know what his intent was, but in our eyes as investigators, Rod had no evidence.
But then, Rod's rash allegation sparks an unexpected development in the case. As talk about Barry Waits spreads, new rumors emerge about a hidden and disturbing side of the former mayor.
I kept hearing these rumors. Barry was the caretaker of his mother's savings account. And it was my understanding that out of $100,000, there was $100 and some change left in the account.
We found out that his mother was actually losing her house. And people started to look at him going, man, you're maybe not the person we thought that you were.
Police decide to take a closer look at Barry's finances.
As we're pulling banking records, I discover where Barry had taken $12,000 out of his mother's account, put it into his personal account, and spent the money. And this had been prior to the murder. So I think he's stealing from his mother. Where did the money go?
You know, if you'll steal from your mother, you'll steal from anybody.
Further analysis of Barry's bank records lead police to suspect that Barry is hiding an illicit source of income.
We need to find out where he's stealing money from. So, start another side investigation into his financial dealings at work.
Investigators interview Barry's superior at the National Guard Armory.
The commander was telling me that Barry really doesn't have any way to steal money, but they're allowed to rent out the armory for weddings and stuff like that. The commander, he said, but he hasn't rented this thing out in quite a while.
Investigators find that Barry had been renting out the armory without notifying his superiors.
Barry was using his position to rent the armory out, and then he was holding the money on his own, and that actually amounted up to a pretty substantial amount.
Barry had worked for the National Guard Armory for at least 20 years. When they realized that he was stealing money from them, they were in shock. They couldn't believe it.
Barry agrees to talk to police about the alleged embezzlement.
We went to interview him in regards to the theft. He confessed right away about the theft, gave us a full statement. We indicted him, and he ended up working out a plea bargain agreement. And he was sentenced to 6 months in jail.
With Barry temporarily behind bars, investigators shift their focus to one crucial question. Could his greed and financial desperation have had something to do with Charlotte's murder?
Just because you're a thief doesn't make you a murderer, but because you need money real bad, that is motive for you to kill somebody. Barry's got a money issue, and that's a flag.
Police discover a pattern of behavior that began years prior, during his marriage to Charlotte.
At the time of the murder, they were behind on several payments, car payments, telephone. They were behind in their utility bills. Although we don't know where the money's going, couldn't determine if Barry had a girlfriend or anything, couldn't find any gambling problems, no drug issues.
Police finally uncover the nature of Barry's voracious spending.
We learned that Barry had a problem playing the stock market, and he had lost a bunch of money. He would do it without Charlotte knowing it, because it was totally against her wishes.
Investigators develop a theory of the murder that revolves around Charlotte's disputed inheritance.
Charlotte's cousin, Wayne Rice, he was contesting the will, so we thought she wanted it settled. And Barry did not want to settle. He was trying to talk her into holding out. Don't give Wayne Rice any money. And she was supposed to have a meeting with an attorney on the day that she was murdered.
Did an argument erupt over the inheritance, leading Barry to murder his wife?
I never would have expected Barry to be the suspect in Charlotte's death. Now, later, doubts began to cloud my mind.
Money had to be a factor in this murder case. I never felt like he went home to kill her that day. I think it was a fight, and I felt that if I could ever get him to talk to me again, I could get a confession from him.
Police ask Barry for another interview. He agrees.
I told him our goal was to continue to work on his wife's murder case, but we needed to talk to him some more. He asked me, can I call my wife? And the state investigator told him the only person you can call is your attorney. Well, that pissed him off. So he said, fine, let me talk to my attorney. So ruined any chance we had to have a confession.
Once again, the investigation goes cold.
There was some angst in the community. We don't want an unsolved murder. We want closure to this case. And I don't think it was ever a case where the police didn't want to bring this to trial. I think it just took time to put a puzzle together.
Police are stunned when nearly 5 years after Charlotte's murder, a pair of unexpected witnesses come forward.
Barry's daughters, they went to the DA's office to their crime victims advocate.
After refusing to speak with police for years, Heather and Kara provide investigators with explosive new information.
And then finally, after so many years, they were ready to offer what they could to find justice for their mother.
The daughters of murder victim Charlotte Waits are finally ready to talk to police after years of silence.
That was a big turning point for us because prior to the time, the girls wouldn't talk to us because the investigation was pointing to their father.
As time went on, Heather and Kara begin to have doubts about Barry's innocence.
When Heather and Kara came forward, they began to tell investigators about their dad stealing money from them.
The women provide a detailed account of how their father had left them penniless.
Because of Barry being a suspect in his wife's murder, the insurance company would never pay her death benefit. At some point, he was able to convince the insurance company to leave the money to the daughters.
At that point, Barry made his daughters an offer for Charlotte's inherited property.
He said, if you'll give me that insurance money, I will give you the land. So they give their dad the money. But when the land dispute settled, he signed over the property to his new wife and left his daughters out to dry.
As police dig deeper, they learn how Barry had manipulated his daughters into silence.
The youngest girl had been being told by her father, you're the main suspect in this case. You can't talk to the police because everybody in this town believes that you killed your mother.
Detectives also find out that Barry tried to throw police off his trail by providing false tips.
He's been submitting Kara's name, submitting the boyfriend's name, throwing red herrings at us. You're making us chase down rabbit holes.
Now they've learned what kind of person their dad is, and they said they finally realized that their dad killed their mother.
With the women offering to testify against their father, the district attorney reviews the evidence and decides to prosecute the case.
The day that we were able to have that warrant served, it was a good day.
Barry is charged with the first-degree murder of his wife of over 2 decades, Charlotte Waits. But the case is not a slam dunk.
You can convict on circumstantial evidence, but when you do that, you have to rule out every other plausible explanation.
The trial begins in November of 2006. Prosecutors begin by describing how and why Barry killed his wife. They assert that Barry left work around 11:30 a.m. to confront Charlotte at home about her disputed inheritance.
So Barry left Armory, went straight home to talk her out of making that settlement offer.
And Barry comes home, and they start arguing. And she says, this is my family, and I'm going to do it, and this is my decision.
Then, Barry turned violent.
And at that point, he gets her. It caused her nose to bleed, and she wipes up with towels, and that was enough. She's just getting out of there and getting away from Barry.
But Barry doesn't let Charlotte escape.
He reaches and grabs her shirt and pulls her shirt back and starts choking her. And he pulls it so tight that he absolutely strangles the life out of Miss Waits. And then he takes her and just kicks her down the steps. He goes down and leans over the body to make sure that she's dead.
Prosecutors say Barry attempted to cover up his crime. He hastily hides the bloody towels and dumps Charlotte's purse.
And then he leaves and he starts putting his alibi together. He then goes back to the armory and he sends a fax, and that fax is supposed to be putting him out of the time frame of being at the house the time she's killed.
The prosecution shows that Barry had sufficient time to commit the murder.
There was an hour-and-a-half time frame from when Mr. Waits had left the armory and back to the armory when he sends a fax.
And prosecutors prove that every other suspect had an airtight alibi.
Every other name, every other person that was mentioned, we can eliminate them. But we could not eliminate Barry.
Later, an expert rules out the possibility of an unknown intruder based on further analysis of the unidentified prints at the scene.
The fingerprint expert says these are little kids' fingerprints. They don't have anything to do with this crime. But Barry Waits' fingerprints were down low, close to Charlotte Waits' body.
Finally, Barry's daughters take the stand.
You could read it on their faces and you could hear it in their voices. They were 100% convinced that their dad killed their mother.
After a brief deliberation, the jury reaches a verdict.
When the jury came back guilty, it wasn't relief. It was just a feeling of calm.
I went to her grave that afternoon and I said, okay, sweet girl, you can rest in peace because we know that your killer is going to pay for what he did.
Barry Waits, the former mayor of Lynette, is sentenced to 40 years in prison.
I think at one time, Barry was a person that intended to take care of his family. But whatever demons he had that made him burn up his family's money, his mother's money, consumed him, overtook him, and the need for money was more important than his wife's life or his daughter's love.
This sweet family was totally devastated by that one senseless criminal act. I think Charlotte would want to be remembered as a person who loved life, loved her family, loved her profession. Every day of my life, I miss her.
A self-made couple making plans for the next stage of their lives.
They were getting ready to have a quiet retirement.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back.
They had a lot of friends and loved spending time with family.
Gunned down, execution style, in their own home.
It just seemed to make no sense. Who would do that, and what could possibly be the motive?
While searching for the killer, investigators uncover a world of greed and deceit.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money.
He felt he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb.
People were saying that he was very upset. It certainly is motive.
A series of chilling discoveries.
We learned that he was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Everything he's told us is a lie.
Points to a killer no one ever imagined.
People were shocked.
It shows what a messed up psyche he's got.
It was unbelievable how somebody can be that cold-blooded.
On the outskirts of La Crosse, Wisconsin, lies the prestigious neighborhood of Berry Mills. In early spring of 2010, this quiet community is rocked by a disturbing 911 call.
911, what is the address to David? Okay, what's going on?
I'm at my mom and dad's house. I came out to check that on the...
Your dad is what?
He's on the floor.
Where's your mom?
My mom is by the computer.
Is your mom breathing?
No.
Okay, and your dad is not breathing?
No.
Okay, all right.
Police race to the scene. First responding officers lead 40-year-old Eric Cola away from his deceased parents' home. while detectives head inside.
We could see that there was a male lying on the kitchen floor. There was a large pool of blood around his head.
The blood was coagulated, so it had been there a while. It wasn't fresh blood.
He was holding his car keys in one hand. He had his coat on, so it was clear that he had just walked in the door. He hadn't even set everything on the counter yet. As I viewed the male victim, the wounds appeared to be a gunshot. It was near the temple of his head.
Around the corner is like a hallway entryway with a computer desk, and the female victim was there. She was shot in the head also.
Her hands are on the keyboard, and so you could see that she had been typing before she was shot. What she was typing didn't appear to be significant, but it made us believe that she had no idea that someone was behind her going to shoot her. It appeared that they ambushed them.
The victims are identified as 68-year-old Dennis Kola and his wife, 65-year-old Myrna. As investigators examine the scene, they make note of other telling details.
We didn't know if it was a single killer or more than one person, but you would expect more disturbance if there were more than one, or that they would have overpowered the victims, and that didn't seem to have happened.
With Myrna sitting at the computer comfortably, that led us to wonder if she was the first to be killed. And her husband, Dennis, came home, and he was the second one shot. There was the smell of decomposition. At that point, we weren't sure how many days earlier they were killed, but we needed to get information pretty quickly.
Detectives find no sign of forced entry and no indication of any kind of struggle.
The crime lab comes in. They collect fingerprints and DNA and the computer for analysis. We went upstairs and we noticed in the one bedroom there was a dresser that was disturbed, and it appeared that it had been ransacked. What was unusual about it was the person started at the top and worked their way down with the chest of drawers. But if you did it that way, you wouldn't be able to see what was in the drawer below it.
This looked like someone was trying to make it look like a burglary, but nothing seemed to be missing.
And there were many other valuables in the house, including Myrna's purse, and Dennis' wallet was still in his back pocket. It looked like this was staged, quite frankly.
While investigators continue searching for clues, they find what could be a key piece of evidence.
The bedroom had a .22 rifle in the closet. There's also a box of .22 shells on a shelf that had been moved and partially opened.
That was very possibly the gun that was used in the homicides.
So the gun is sent to the crime lab for an analysis.
As the crime scene investigation continues, news of the murders spreads quickly through the close-knit community.
When I heard about it, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. I was devastated. It hit me real hard. It was like, why would somebody kill them? Everybody loved them.
Born and raised in Wisconsin, Dennis and Myrna Kola had been happily married for 42 years.
Dennis and Myrna had a lot of friends. They had deep roots here.
They had children and grandchildren, and they were very popular.
I didn't hear of anyone that had anything bad to say about either one of them.
From humble beginnings, Dennis rose to become a successful businessman.
Dennis had graduated as a pharmacist, and he had owned a number of pharmacies and businesses throughout the years in different locations.
I worked with him for 2 years. As a boss, he was down to earth, fantastic guy. If you needed something, he was there. He treated me like a daughter.
Dennis was successful in life and in love.
Him and his wife, they were always happy, having a good time. Myrna had a lot of energy. She was very sociable.
Myrna was very well educated, and she was presently teaching part-time on a substitute basis.
They They had a good marriage. They enjoyed life.
The couple had 2 children, their son Eric and 37-year-old daughter Cindy. Both were married with families of their own.
Their family seemed pretty tight. Dennis and Myrna, they were involved with their kids and involved with their grandkids.
These were parents who were very dedicated. They really wanted the best for their kids and loved spending time with family. Dennis and Myrna were getting ready to have a quiet retirement and relaxing and enjoying life.
Now, those dreams have been brutally snatched away.
Both shot. I would have never in my life expected something like this to happen.
It just seemed to make no sense. We're trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
While police bring the Cola's son Eric into the station to get more information, investigators go door to door looking for witnesses.
We start canvassing to see if anyone saw anything, heard anything.
Nobody in the neighborhood had seen anything suspicious.
For them, it was just mostly shock. They couldn't believe that these 2 people had been killed.
As detectives continue to search for a lead, they get their first break.
One of the neighbors mentioned that he thought he knew the motive and why it happened, and also the murder.
He was very concerned. He believed that his life was in danger. He felt that he may be next.
This neighbor, Steve Burgess, was a banker, and he thought that he may have been the intended target of the homicide. His reasoning was he had got a threatening call multiple times from a person that threatened to kill him.
Coming up, new evidence emerges.
The day after the homicides, he cashed his $50,000 check and never told us.
And family secrets come to light.
There was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the 2.
Dennis always complained that he was worthless and that he didn't want to work.
She had apparently lit into Dennis in a rage.
Until a disturbing clue reveals a twisted plan.
Someone had put this threatening note in his mailbox.
Now he believes that someone was out to get him.
And exposes a cold-blooded betrayal nobody saw coming.
I never thought they were the kind of person that would do something like that.
It was extremely unexpected.
It's just chilling.
Grandparents Myrna and Dennis Cola have been brutally executed in their own home. Now, one of their neighbors, banker Steve Burgess, tells investigators the killer could be coming after him.
He was very concerned, and he believed that someone was out to get him, and he didn't know who, but the homicides may have been intended for him and his family.
Detectives ask Steve why someone would want him dead.
So at that time, the market crashed. There was people with money issues.
A lot of people came to him at the bank for loans, but they had no collateral. So people were very angry that Steve would not give them loans. The last threat was a couple of days earlier. It was a threat of violence. It certainly had to be taken serious.
If Steve was the intended target, how did Dennis and Myrna end up gunned down instead?
What he explained was a Google Earth search in front of Burgess's house showed the wrong address, showed Dennis and Myrna's address instead of his, and he thought that the killer killed the wrong people.
He felt that somebody had come to his house to follow through on the threat, but they ended up at Dennis and Myrna's residence. It was a concern that this possibly could have been a mistake on behalf of the murderer, and the homicides were not intended for Dennis and Myrna.
Before investigators can pursue the lead, the autopsy results arrive.
The autopsy report determined that they were both shot with a .22 caliber rifle.
But it was inconclusive. There wasn't enough bullet fragment left to tell if it came from the gun that we found in the house. No fingerprints were found. I mean, even from the victims, like the gun had been cleaned up.
The autopsy report also confirmed that they had been deceased for a few days before the 911 call. It was likely that they were killed on that Friday.
The time of death sheds new light on the threatening phone call made to neighbor Steve Burgess.
We saw that call had come in Sunday morning after the Kulas were murdered. So the timeline it didn't make any sense.
We were able to determine that the threats against Steve Burgess had nothing to do with the deaths of Dennis and Myrna.
With their first lead a bust, detectives turned their attention closer to home.
We knew Eric and his sister Cindy were very close to their parents.
Eric did day trading and stuff like that, work on stocks. He was doing well. Dennis and Eric were pretty close. Some people would say like bread and butter. They'd have get-togethers all the time.
Eric was the one that found the bodies. We needed a conversation with Eric for information that he might be able to provide us.
Hoping he can provide details about the crime, investigators interview Eric at the station.
Eric was still extremely emotional over the deaths of his parents, but he said he wanted to be as helpful as he possibly could and would do whatever he could to try to find who was responsible.
Detectives ask how he came to find his parents had been killed.
He said the school called and said that Myrna hadn't shown up for work. They called his parents and they didn't respond.
So Eric tried calling and was unable to get an answer, so he called his sister and asked if she had any contact with them, and she had not.
He became concerned and drove over to the house.
Once he walked in the house, he observed his father lying on the kitchen floor and started searching for his mom, and then also found her deceased.
Eric said he was extremely close to his parents. His dad, supported all of his endeavors. They were just the best of buddies.
We asked Eric what was the last time he had seen his parents, and he said a few days before the homicides.
He visited them like he did all the time. He said his dad was working on the deck, and his mom was doing laundry. There didn't seem to be anything unusual.
Investigators ask Eric where he was on the day of the murders.
He said that Friday was he and his wife's anniversary. He had worked till 2. Then he helped his buddy Mike do some work in a bathroom. They were renovating a bathroom. Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house, looking for a specific plant that his wife liked, a hanging plant.
Eric presents a receipt stamped at 6:15 p.m.
After he bought the plant, he went directly home, and they got ready to go out for the evening with friends to celebrate the anniversary. Eric said that he had tried over the weekend to contact his parents and wasn't able to do so. He was becoming concerned, but just thought that they were busy.
When asked who might have wanted to harm his parents, Eric says they were well-liked and had no enemies.
It seemed really strange, really unusual. No reason for the victims to be killed. Both victims killed.
Before concluding Eric's interview, detectives get results back from the crime lab.
The report came back indicating that the time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Myrna was using the computer, and the last keystroke was 5:41 p.m. So that gave us a timestamp. That's huge.
With the keystroke data, detectives verify Eric's alibi.
We spoke to his friend Mike, and Mike said yes, Eric was here until about 5:30 when he left, and he was going to go to the store. So he basically confirmed what Eric was telling us was correct. The receipt, combined with what his friend Mike said, it appeared that there wasn't enough time for Eric to commit the crime. Also, it just seemed very unlikely that someone who loved his mother and father very much could be involved in something like this.
Before Eric leaves the police station, he remembers crucial information that takes detectives by surprise.
Eric had told us that his sister Cindy and her husband Pat were being financially supported by Dennis and Myrna, and that their dad, Dennis, told Cindy they were getting cut off financially.
The Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy had called Dennis Dennis let her know that there was not going to be any more money. She became very upset.
Had there been an argument over money, leading Cindy to kill?
That's extremely unexpected, but she did have motive, so you start looking at Cindy as a suspect.
Police investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their daughter Cindy may have been angry with her father after he cut off financial support. The two had a tense conversation just hours before the murders.
When we started talking to the circle of friends and family, we were told Dennis was more than generous. He gave tens of thousands to Cindy and her husband.
Cindy relied on her parents. They needed this money to pay their bills. When Dennis had told Cindy that he was cutting her off, she didn't know how those bills were going to get paid.
Detectives learn the Colas children are set to inherit over $700,000 from their parents' death. While son Eric is known in the community as a successful businessman, Cindy's circumstances are different.
Cindy didn't have much money, if any, and she was constantly asking for money because they were not making ends meet.
She was working a minimum wage job or a little above that, and Pat, her husband, couldn't keep a job, would quit or get fired. They were living paycheck to paycheck and Dennis's handout to handout.
Me and Dennis would talk about Cindy at the pharmacy, and he kept telling me that he was sick and tired of supporting her every month, helping them out with their bills and stuff like that. And that Friday morning, he was very upset, and he said, "My daughter called me this morning, crying on the phone because I told my daughter that I'm cutting her and her husband off."
When she would get upset, she would get just extreme, over-the-top emotions. Cindy hearing that the cash cow was being butchered would be a reason for her to now go off the rails, and it went from bad to worse.
Cindy became a strong suspect.
Police bring Cindy into the station for questioning.
Cindy appeared broke up over the deaths of her parents, but she really laid out the family dynamic. Her parents had considered her the black sheep of the family. She said that she didn't believe her parents cared about her like they cared about Eric, and she was upset with how they treated her.
She told us, according to her parents, that Eric could do no wrong and that Cindy was a disappointment and continued to be a disappointment.
But Cindy denied that she had anything to do with her parents' death, even though there was this friction between them.
Investigators questioned Cindy about the argument with her father the morning of the murders.
Cindy downplayed the conversation she had with her father. She said just that she was disappointed her father had said he wouldn't give her any money. But it wasn't a negative conversation.
Detectives wonder if Cindy is more guilty than she's letting on.
There was a lot of tension between Cindy and her parents. There was disapproval there.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money with the inheritance, and given her bad feelings, all these things could lead to the fact that she may have been the one that took the lives of her parents.
With suspicion swirling, police asked Cindy where she was when her parents were killed.
On Friday, she was working and had left at 4:45. They have a time clock. She had punched out.
After work, she had stopped at the store just after 5:30. She'd purchased beer and ice, and then her and Patrick at a barbecue with the neighbors.
Police work to confirm Cindy's alibi.
She was working. That was verified then. Cindy had stopped at a Quick Trip, and the Quick Trips all have video, so she was on camera at a Quick Trip near her home at the time of the homicides, not anywhere near her parents.
While Cindy is ruled out as the shooter, her husband Patrick comes into focus.
Family and friends said that Patrick did not get along with Dennis and Myrna, and Patrick stood to inherit a substantial amount of money along with Cindy.
Dennis did not like her husband at all. He told me that Cindy's husband married Cindy for the money because he knew that Dennis and Myrna had money. Dennis always complained that his son-in-law, Patrick, was worthless. and that he didn't want to work. He sits and plays with the video games, and he's too lazy to go find a job.
Investigators dig deeper into Patrick's relationship with his in-laws.
Talking to family and friends, we learned that Dennis and Myrna were upset when Patrick and Cindy got married. They asked Cindy not to marry him. They felt that he lacked motivation, and they remained unhappy with him. And I think the feeling was mutual.
According to some reports, when there was alcohol involved, he could have been a violent person.
Apparently, the Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy told Patrick that they were not going to be getting any more money. People were saying that Patrick was even more angry than Cindy, that they were being cut off financially. It was a large red flag.
Detectives also learned Patrick had the capability to pull off an execution-style hit.
Eric and other relatives were now pointing us toward Patrick, saying that he was a Marine and that he knew how to handle weapons.
It certainly moves Patrick up to the top of the list as far as suspects.
Police hunting the killer of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their son-in-law, Patrick Cowell, has motive for murder.
Patrick was a great interest to us because he did not get along with Dennis and Myrna, and he stood to inherit a lot of money, so it certainly is motive. And Patrick was in the Marine Corps, so he would be an expert marksman.
When I heard that the police are starting to question him, I thought maybe after Dennis mentioned cutting them off, that might have triggered his son-in-law to kill them both.
At the police station, detectives confront Patrick about his relationship with his in-laws.
Patrick said that he was not popular in that family, that he was not comfortable with them, they weren't comfortable with him. There was kind of a cold relationship. He knew from Cindy that they were being cut off from Dennis and Myrna. He wasn't happy about it, but he denied having any involvement in the homicides.
Investigators pressed Patrick about where he was at the time of the murders.
He was without a job at the time, and basically he spent most of his day on the sofa with Xbox. We asked if he had any guns in the house, and he agreed that he did. We asked if he would turn those over to us, and he said he would.
As detectives wrap up their interview with Patrick, patrol officers are dispatched to collect the gun and gaming console, which are then sent on to the crime lab.
The gun had been analyzed and, in fact, was eliminated as the weapon used to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Also, we were able to prove through the crime lab that he was on the Xbox at the time he said he was. And so that eliminated him because he was home at the time that Dennis and Myrna were killed.
With Patrick ruled out, police are left scrambling for new suspects. The unsolved homicides leave the community on edge.
When a crime like this happens in a small town like Berry Mills, there's a lot of pressure on law enforcement to get it solved. People want answers. These aren't strangers to them. These are people they know.
People in that neighborhood were fearful. You know, the closer you are to something like that, the more concerned you are.
We were kind of scared for our lives because we didn't know why something like this would happen.
Looking for new leads, investigators dig into Dennis's business connections and the wealthy pharmacist's other ventures around town.
Dennis had a nephew, Nick Herring, who was promised a business from Dennis. They were going to open a car dealership together and actually did.
What we understood was that Nick was very familiar with running car dealerships and had done a good job.
Business was good, but then Dennis changed the deal.
As the dealership was up and running, Dennis brought Eric, his son, in to start running it with Nick, and there was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the two.
Nick was like complaining all the time, so Dennis had to go help out with the business. Dennis said they could not get along together. and he ended up buying Nick out.
At that point, Nick was quite unhappy, and there was some falling out.
Tension mounted until Dennis sold the business, leaving Nick resentful.
Nick lost a pretty substantial amount of money, so he would certainly have reason to be upset.
Could Nick have harbored a deadly desire for revenge? Police bring him into the station for questioning.
We spoke to Nick Herring, and he admitted that the relationship had soured.
Nick had said that Dennis had given him too low amount for the business and that he got cheated out of some profit. Nick felt that he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb by his uncle.
Despite the bad blood, Nick insists he's not involved in the murders.
Nick said that it was in the past that he had started his own car dealership. He was successful, and that although it was upsetting, he wouldn't hold a grudge, and he had no reason to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Nick said that he had worked until about 5:30. Then he had picked up his girlfriend, and they'd gone out to the tavern. We were able to confirm that he was at work all day, and then the bartender where they were at could confirm that he and his girlfriend had spent the evening. And so we were able to eliminate him.
Having ruled out yet another suspect, the investigation into the Cola murders hits a roadblock.
It was very disturbing because it just seemed to make no sense. Here's a couple that are a retirement age, had long, successful careers. For someone to come in and just murder them, it's senseless. We were still trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
1 week after the murders, police receive news that jolts the investigation back to life.
We get a call that a patrol car is being sent out to Eric Kula's residence for a suspicious item in the mailbox. Eric said that he had got a threatening letter. He was now extremely concerned that he was going to get killed.
One week after Dennis and Myrna Cola are ruthlessly gunned down in their own home, police learn their 40-year-old son Eric has received a threatening note. Could he be the next target?
Someone had put this note in his mailbox. He was really, really concerned. This note said, "Fixed you." The message is kind of unusual, but Eric thought they'd killed his parents and were now going to come after him.
He had no idea who would have left it or where it came from.
There was an envelope, but it wasn't mailed.
The handwriting looked like it was done by someone very young. It was so strange. It was probably written that way so a handwriting analysis couldn't be done.
When it comes to Eric's safety, detectives don't take any chances.
We have to try to figure out what was going on.
We had an investigator and a camera to watch his property. We start canvassing Eric's neighborhood to see if anyone saw anything.
But with no witnesses, police are still left with no idea who placed the note.
This is perplexing. We're trying to determine, was this somebody local or was this someone from out of the area? We were very concerned.
With this new potential threat, investigators cast a wider net to find the Cola's killer. But when they scour Dennis and Myrna's computers, phones, and finances, they're surprised at what they find.
We subpoenaed Dennis and Myrna's bank records and noticed that there's a check written and cashed on Dennis and Myrna's account for $50,000. It's cashed on the day after the murder, and it's made out to Eric Kula and was deposited into Eric's bank account. It seemed really strange. So you just found your parents dead, and the next day you go cash a check for $50K. It had to be looked at.
Detectives reach out to Eric, hoping to learn more details.
Eric's explanation is his dad gave it to him on the day that he had stopped over at his parents' house,
That's very interesting because of all the conversations we had with Eric, he never mentioned this, and suddenly we have a check for $50,000, and if everything was okay, why wouldn't he tell us about it?
To have a check that was deposited the day after the murders by a family member, that set off alarms for investigators.
After we find that check, we look for other checks.
We used a forensic accountant to review Eric's finances because it was quite complicated with the day trading that he was involved in. When the accountant went through it with us and explained what we were looking at, I think we almost fell off our chairs because we had no idea that this was what was going on. He told everybody that he was extremely successful with his day trading, but Eric was broke.
He was day trading, but it was a myth as far as making profit. The person looking at his financials basically called BS. She told us this guy's worth nothing. He's worth about $2,000 total. He was blowing smoke.
Then, police uncover more startling information about Eric's financial circumstances.
We learned that Eric was also going to his parents and receiving large amounts of money. Through the years, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. He led everybody to believe that he was doing so well, including his wife. Eric told her that he was making a lot of money. There was nothing to worry about, that he was just doing great.
Despite everyone's impression that Eric was this successful day trader, his parents had been funding his and his family's lifestyle.
If he was going to have to admit that to family, friends, it was going to be devastating.
Detectives learn when Dennis and Myrna stopped financially supporting their daughter, Cindy, they also cut off Eric.
We knew just shortly before Dennis and Myrna were killed, Eric found out that he was no longer getting money from his parents.
The damning evidence continues to pile up against Eric.
Dennis told me he was giving money to Eric, but basically he was done giving to both kids. He says, I need to tell them I'm done supporting them. It's about time I put my foot down and cut them off.
As investigators start to discover that Eric is not what he seems, shocking results come back from the lab.
The state crime lab did a handwriting analysis on that check for $50,000. It wasn't Dennis's signature on that check. We found out that it was Eric's handwriting, that he had forged his father's name on that check.
Everything he's told us is a lie. So things are starting to really roll toward Eric.
Police obtain a warrant to search Eric's home, hoping to find additional incriminating evidence.
We're in the basement. Among other things, was a box of envelopes in a desk drawer. The fixed U note had a security envelope, and every one of them has a different pattern for their security pattern. Lo and behold, those envelopes have the same pattern. We were able to determine that envelope in Eric's mailbox with the fixed U note came from the box of envelopes in his home. From his fire pit in his backyard, we found things that would be associated with making a fixed U note. A spring from a spiral notebook. The letter was written on spiral notebook paper. A barrel of a pen used to write the address. Those types of things are in the fire. So that fixed U note came from his house. It didn't look good for Eric.
In the search, detectives also discover a .22 caliber rifle, similar to what police believe was the murder weapon. The gun is sent to the ballistics lab for testing.
With the lies and forgery, we were pretty confident that Eric was our guy.
But at that point, Eric had an alibi for the entire time that the homicides were occurring. So we're trying to figure out how he shot Dennis and Myrna.
Detectives investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola suspect the couple's own son, 40-year-old Eric, is the killer. but they need hard evidence to lay charges.
We went out and started re-interviewing witnesses and reviewing all the evidence that we had.
As detectives try to learn more details about Eric's connection to the crime, the ballistics results come back. Police wonder if the rifle found in Eric's home will prove to be the murder weapon.
Dennis and Myrna were shot with a .22 caliber rifle, but Eric's gun wasn't the gun that was involved in the crime.
Undeterred, detectives recheck Eric's alibi for when his parents were being murdered.
The time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Prior to the homicide, Eric said that he had helped his buddy Mike renovating a bathroom.
When we originally talked to Mike, he said that Eric had left his house about 5:30, but when we re-interviewed him, he said it's very possible it could have been earlier. Once Mike's story changed, we really thought that we were heading in the right direction.
Investigators take a closer look at Eric's timeline.
Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house to get a specific plant for his wife. At the time of the homicide, he had stopped at the first store, and that store didn't have it, so he had to go to the other store, got the plant, and produced a receipt.
Eric's receipt is stamped 6:15 p.m. The second store is located only 10 minutes from the Cola's residence. But where was Eric at 5:41 when his parents were being shot?
We checked with the garden center, the first one he went to, and they had plenty of those plants on the day and time that Eric said that they didn't have any. We also reviewed video footage, and he's not there, nor is his vehicle seen coming or leaving the parking lot. So there was a window of opportunity for Eric to commit the murders. He had no alibi for the time that the computer showed that Myrna was shot.
With Eric's alibi torn apart, detectives bring him in for another interview. They begin by confronting Eric about forging the $50,000 check.
Eric explained that he had permission from his dad to write checks out to himself, and that his dad had actually given him the check, but just was too busy, so told him to sign it himself. He told us, I write them all the time, and that was commonplace for him to do that. It's a lie, an approvable one. He's never written one. He couldn't produce a single check that he had ever written. He was confronted with the fixed U note and about the envelopes, and that they did come from his house. With what we found and what we knew about his financials, all of those things together are great evidence.
We just went down item after item after item after item, and Eric acted, in my opinion, desperate, and he wanted to leave.
But Eric was no longer free to go. On July 29th, 2010, police charge Eric with the murder of his parents, Dennis and Myrna Cola.
What we believe started this whole crime in motion was the fact that Eric was being cut off. Financially, he was desperate.
Detectives piece together how the double homicide unfolded.
We believe he went to see his mom at their home, and Myrna was sitting at the computer, and then Eric walked upstairs, got the gun that was located in the closet, came down and shot his mother, and then waited for his father to arrive. When Dennis came home, he was shot almost immediately, within seconds after he walked through that door.
After the murders, Eric wipes the gun clean and returns it to the closet.
Eric then took a check and said to himself, $50,000 will get me through until the will is settled.
After he shot his parents, he went to a garden center, bought the plant for his alibi, and went home to celebrate their anniversary dinner that night.
He's as cold-blooded as a murder-for-hire man. His parents did nothing but love him and take care of him his whole life. He's a narcissistic little son of a bitch and thought that his dad owed him a living.
Eric Cola's arrest stuns the community.
Everyone thought that he was this golden child, that he had a great relationship with his parents, that he was this successful day trader. That he could have done this, people were shocked.
I would have never expected Eric to do this. The way Dennis talked about him, always bragged about his son, and I never thought he was the kind of person that would do something like that.
In June 2012, 2 years after Dennis and Myrna Cola were killed, a jury finds their son Eric guilty of intentional murder.
His sister, Cindy, during the sentencing hearing, was sobbing, and she begged the judge in that courtroom to make sure justice was done that day.
Eric Cola is sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 6 years for forgery.
Many times I've thought about how somebody could do that, and I just simply can't fathom it. I guess we all lose a bit of our innocence when this kind of thing happens.
Myrna and Dennis are still dearly missed by their family and friends.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back. I think of them very, very often. And my memory of Dennis is always a smiley face. I do miss him a lot. Sometimes I still think, boy, why did it have to be you? He'd still be living right now, happy life, finally retired, and enjoying his grandkids. And Myrna would probably still be dragging him on vacation.
A single mother with a big heart.
If you needed anything, she was always there. She was a sweet girl. Everybody loved her.
Is the victim of a bizarre murder.
Duct tape had been wrapped around her head about 14 times.
This is nothing I had ever seen before or even heard of before.
Leaving her young son as the only witness.
A 4-year-old child had been just mere feet away, his mother being killed.
Investigators focus on the men in her life.
This guy, he wouldn't look at us. He was more nervous than normal.
And that polygraph test, he passed. It was frustrating as hell.
She was using Norma's house for these sexual liaisons.
To unveil a killer hiding in plain sight.
Of everyone we dealt with, he was maybe the coolest customer of the bunch.
People didn't see that inner demon. He was an unexpected killer.
It just blows you away.
Port Hueneme, California, a peaceful beach town on the Pacific coast.
It's a hidden gem. Port Hueneme is about 60 miles north of LA. It's a completely different environment. It's a lot more relaxed.
It's a quiet town, and it's a town that has, for a long time, a ridiculously low crime rate and very rarely a homicide.
But the tranquility of the seaside community is shattered one summer morning when police get an urgent call.
On June 1st, 1993, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, our dispatch received a call of a possible homicide.
An ex-husband had called up and said that his ex-wife had been murdered.
We hadn't had a homicide in over 3 years. It took me a second to realize, okay, this is real.
Detectives arrive to begin the investigation, but nothing can prepare them for the scene inside.
I got inside the house, and then it was like, oh my God. This is just too bizarre for words. She's laying on the floor, head encased in duct tape. It had been partially cut away, but it appeared as though someone had tried to wrap her like a mummy.
It went from the top of her forehead to the chin.
It was just incredibly strange. This is nothing I had ever seen before or even heard of before.
And some rigor mortis had set in the back portion of her body because she was laying on the back. Usually rigor mortis takes a number of hours to show up. We estimated that the victim probably died in the early morning hours. When I saw that duct tape, the first thing that entered my mind was this was somebody she knew. Whoever did it didn't want to have her look at them while they were committing the crime.
Looking to unravel the mystery of this bizarre murder, detectives turn to the victim's ex-husband, who claims to have discovered the body.
At the house, the ex-husband was there, his brother was there, and 2 younger sons were there.
The ex-husband, Tony, identifies the victim as 32-year-old Norma Rodriguez, mother to 2 boys, Andrew, 11 years old, and Austin, 4 years old.
Tony, he said that he had come over to the house to pick up the kids to take them to school, which was his regular practice.
The 2 boys were still asleep in their beds. When Tony realized what had happened to their mother, he told them to stay in their room until police arrived.
Tony, his brother Hector, and the 2 sons were transported to the Port Hueneme Police Department, where they were going to be interviewed separately. Tony and Hector were first at the house, and we needed to determine what happened.
Police continue to comb through the house looking for clues.
It was not a scene of extreme violence. There wasn't blood anywhere. There weren't a lot of things overturned.
In the bedroom, we located her purse, and it was intact. There wasn't anything that seemed to be missing.
This was not like a burglary that had gone wrong.
There's no sign of forced entry into the home. Then, something else catches the detective's eye.
I noticed a set of keys that were on the floor. They were in an unusual location, close to her body. We checked and confirmed they were Norma's house keys.
But why were Norma's keys lying next to her body? As investigators finish processing the scene, Norma's sister, Aralia, arrives.
I was supposed to pick her up because we were going to go looking for a car for her. And I had been calling her. And I drove to her house. That's when I saw the yellow tape. I saw the police department there, and that's what they told me would happen. And my worst nightmares, did I ever think that this would happen to my sister? It is horrible, horrible.
Norma Rodriguez was born and raised in rural Texas.
We were 7 sisters and 1 brother. She was the middle child, and, I was really close to Norma. She was very quiet, very reserved, a very big heart. If you needed anything, she was always there.
I first met Norma in 1975 in junior high school. We were 14 years old, and we became friends right away. Well, we used to hang out together and just go everywhere together. She could be feisty, but she was a sweet girl. Everybody loved her.
After high school, Norma moved to Oxnard, California for college and soon fell for another student named Tony.
She loved him. She just loved being with him.
Their college romance became more serious, and 2 years later in 1982, Tony popped the question. They soon had their first son, Andrew, and their second son, Austin, arrived 7 years later.
She was just a great mom. Norma was very devoted to her boys. Her boys were her life.
But in 1991, after almost 10 years together, Tony and Norma's marriage became strained.
Tony was really never around.
She was getting into arguments and fights with Tony, asking him to provide for them. She realized it would be an easier life for her if she just went on her own without Tony. And that's what she did.
Later that year, Norma moved with her sons to the neighboring town of Port Hueneme. She got a job at a local retail store and started a new chapter in her life.
Being a single mom, people might think that's a hard job. She enjoyed it. And it was hard for her, but she was happy.
Who would want to take the life of this loving mother, and in such a bizarre way? Later that day, at police headquarters, detectives begin to interview Norma's ex-husband, Tony Rodriguez, and his brother, Hector.
As the first two parties to the scene, the investigators had to look at them.
The detectives asked Tony about how he found Norma earlier that day.
Tony, he said that he had knocked on the door, but Norma didn't answer. Sons Andrew and Austin were asleep. The door was locked, so then he used a credit card in order to slip the lock, and he was able to open the front door.
When Tony and Hector entered the living room, they saw Norma lying on the floor, her face wrapped in duct tape.
Hector told us that he cut the tape because they didn't know whether she was deceased or not, and they wanted to try to make it easier for her to breathe. He's the one that had the scissors in his possession, and he's the one that decided to cut the tape off of her face.
We thought, wow, that's a little strange. Why is this guy doing this? Why is he messing up our evidence? You know, Hector told us that the body was still somewhat warm. And that didn't make sense because by that time she had full rigor mortis. I mean, she had obviously been deceased for a number of hours. I just wasn't buying it.
Investigators are skeptical. Is Hector misleading police because the two men have something to hide? They hone in on Tony and Hector as possible suspects.
We don't know these people. We don't know what they're capable of.
Tony and Hector are suspicious. And Tony, being Norma's ex, he was right at the top of our list.
Coming up, detectives broaden their hunt for a possible killer.
We've got countless potential witnesses, countless potential suspects, interviews with co-workers.
We didn't know who it was. I just wanted him off the streets.
Investigators suspect a love interest from Norma's past has something to hide.
It was a brief but intense relationship.
It was that selfishness, that narcissistic quality that would cause him to end someone else's life.
And what police uncover shocks everyone.
All this time, were we dealing with a true sociopath and, couldn't see it?
Mother of two, Norma Rodriguez, has been found murdered with her head wrapped in duct tape. Less than 24 hours into the investigation, detectives are interviewing their first suspect, starting with her ex-husband, Tony Rodriguez.
In a case like this, statistics will show you that an overwhelming amount of the time it's going to be that significant other or former significant other who ends up being your suspect.
Investigators ask Tony about his relationship with Norma in the weeks leading up to her death.
At the time, Tony said that they had been separated for a couple of years. I don't believe they had filed for divorce yet, but they were living separately, and Tony had visitation rights. They weren't close friends anymore, but they tried to maintain the friendship for the boys.
But police have a different account from Norma's family.
We learned that shortly before the homicide, there were some conflicts.
Norma, she was upset at the fact that he would come make excuses to come over with the boys, but he would end up wanting to stay there. She used to complain about that. I said, don't let him in. He doesn't have the right to come into your house. And she was a little timid when it came down to Tony.
According to loved ones, Tony couldn't accept that Norma was moving on. Detectives press him about his whereabouts in the hours surrounding Norma's murder.
Tony said that on May the 30th, early afternoon, he talked with Norma and asked if our son Andrew could stay with him. Tony had tickets to an Angels game the next day, and so they agreed that that was okay.
Tony says Andrew was dropped back home the next night. At the time, Tony never entered the house. He found Norma's body the next day. Did Norma's ex innocently walk into the crime scene that morning, or had something more sinister happened?
The potential motive with him was he wanted the kids. Maybe one thing led to another, and he lost control.
In a room nearby, police questioned Tony's brother Hector, since he was with him when Norma's body was found. They ask where he and Tony went after dropping Norma's son at his mom's.
Hector, he said that they had been at his residence with other family members in the city of Oxnard. And when we interviewed those family members, they corroborated what Tony and Hector told us.
Knowing their alibis are far from concrete, detectives ask Tony and Hector to take polygraph tests.
The results of the tests were that they were being honest in stating that they did not know anything about the homicide.
With no hard evidence to hold them, investigators are forced to let the two men go. News of Norma's death quickly spreads through the small community.
When I found out about her being murdered like that, I had told my cousin that I had just talked to her. It can't be true because I just talked to her. It was true.
At the police station, detectives received the results of the autopsy.
The cause of death was established as manual strangulation. Norma wasn't a tiny woman. Whoever did this had to possess significant upper body strength.
Some important details emerge about the duct tape.
The length of it was approximately 20 feet and had been wrapped around her head about 14 times.
The duct tape was examined and there were skin cells that were discovered. But in 1993, DNA technology was in its infancy. You had to have a fairly significant sample size in order to potentially get a result from it. In Norma's case, they didn't have nearly enough in these samples.
To find out who did this, we have to dig deeper.
Searching for new leads, detectives hope Norma's 11-year-old son, Andrew, can help. With Tony's consent, the detectives talk with him at the station.
When you're interviewing any type of a witness, it's a difficult process. And you have to understand that. When you're interviewing a child, it's extremely difficult. We interviewed Andrew, and we just wanted to try to get as much information as we could from the date of the homicide. Andrew had gone to a baseball game with his father and his uncle. Later at night, Andrew was dropped off at the house, and the house was dark.
Andrew walked up to the front door, found it was locked. He went around to his bedroom, saw that the window was open, and crawled in.
Then, Andrew shares a disturbing detail told to him by his younger brother.
When Andrew came into the bedroom, 4-year-old Austin had said, "Mommy has a Band-Aid on her face." That didn't register immediately with Andrew, and so he went to bed. And it wasn't until morning that Andrew found out exactly what Austin meant by a Band-Aid. It just ripped at your heart knowing that a 4-year-old child had been just mere feet away from his mother being killed. And at one point he had come out, he had seen his mother's body. That just ripped at me a lot.
What else had Norma's youngest son, Austin, seen? Detectives decide to speak to the 4-year-old.
At first he was withdrawn. He really didn't want to talk about it, which was understandable. I knew that because he's 4 years old, and I couldn't have gone on much longer than I did. And I knew that I needed to stop. But then he mentioned a man by the name of Corey.
He brought up the name Corey as someone who was over at the house at that time. Now we've got this person who might end up being our prime suspect.
But who was Corey? Had he killed Norma? Did the single mom's youngest son just solve her murder?
We've got to run it down as far as it goes.
Police are investigating the bizarre murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez. Her youngest son, Austin, says he saw a man named Corey at their home around the time of the murder.
At that time, we had no idea who Corey was, but it was something that had to be checked out.
Detectives learn from the family that Corey could be Corey Davis, one of Norma's co-workers. So they head to her workplace.
First step was find out, to what extent Corey knew Norma, if they socialized, if they were friends away from work, and so forth.
Corey was more nervous than normal. In talking with him, he wouldn't look at us. He kept staring down, not tuning in or paying attention.
Corey's unusual behavior during their conversation alarms investigators.
He did not like being talked to and having to answer anything.
They questioned Corey about his relationship with Norma.
He stated that he would interact with Norma at work, but they weren't that close with each other, and they didn't have any interactions beyond that.
Detectives want to know if he was at Norma's house near the time of her murder, as young Austin claimed.
He made it pretty clear that he wasn't at the house at that time. Instead, he said the night of the homicide he was at home. The only people who were there at home with him were his parents. We needed to find out how much of what he was telling us was, provably true.
While officers are sent to check Corey's alibi, detectives speak to Norma's other coworkers, starting with her friend Beatrice.
Beatrice came to Norma's house on Sunday, the day before the homicide. Norma had a get-together, a small barbecue at her house for several of her co-workers.
Police ask Beatrice if she remembers anything unusual about the day of the barbecue.
Beatrice said that while she was there, suddenly Norma can't find her keys anymore. And they ended up searching all over Norma's house, trying to figure out what happened to Norma's keys.
They didn't find them, and then they're laying beside her body, beside her house at the time she's found. We figured someone had taken her keys, and that's how they were able to enter the house.
It's a significant lead. Does this mean the killer stole the keys at Norma's barbecue? Detectives renew their focus on her inner circle.
From everything we knew, this was a pretty personal crime. We had a certain confidence that the killer knew Norma.
At the police station, investigators discover information they received from Corey Davis has some holes.
One of the things we do with everyone is we find out what their addresses are, their date of birth, everything else. And with Corey Davis, one of the things we noticed was that his address he gave us was not the address where he was actually living. So there was a discrepancy there.
Why would Corey withhold that information from detectives? They wonder what else he's hiding.
But at this point in time, Corey jumped out at us as this is the one we need to concentrate on.
Police bring Corey in for an interview, but he's far from helpful.
He's like, well, I don't want to be involved in this. Well, I understand that, but like it or not, you are part of this case. If you want to be eliminated from the suspect pool, the best way to do that is to cooperate with us.
Detectives share details of the crime with Corey to observe his reaction.
With the information that we were giving to him, he was obviously upset, and he took it really hard.
Corey denies any involvement in Norma's death. They ask him to take a polygraph test.
He submitted to the test, and he passed.
All detectives have tying Corey to the crime scene is a statement from Norma's 4-year-old son. But police know he could be mistaken, given his young age and traumatic experience.
At that point, Corey worked his way down the ladder of possible suspects dramatically.
1 week into the investigation, detectives are out of leads. They look at who else was at Norma's barbecue the day before she was killed. Friends tell them about a former coworker named Warren Mackey.
Warren Mackey was a previous co-worker of Norma's, and also he lived in fairly close proximity to her.
Warren and Norma hit it off and became friends.
They worked together for a while, and the work relationship became a social relationship. And it appeared that Warren had something more than just a friendship interest in Norma.
I remember Norma telling me that there was a guy there that she used to work with, and he was always trying to talk to her and trying to ask her out.
Talking to Norma's coworkers, detectives learned that Warren pursued Norma, but she wasn't interested in him romantically.
Norma told Beatrice and some of the other people that she felt that Warren wanted more than to be friends, and that she wasn't interested in that. She tried to curtail any attempts that he may have made to ask her out. Some of the employees that we talked with felt that Warren wasn't real pleased with that. He liked Norma, and that he wanted the relationship a little bit more than what it was.
But Norma still tried to maintain their friendship.
She noticed he was kind of like an outcast, just very private. So she tried to include him in the group. She didn't want to leave him out.
As detectives look closer at the quiet coworker, the information they uncover is concerning.
Started picking up little details about him at that point. There were some people who said, yeah, good guy, he was okay to work with. But, there were enough people who pointed out that he was a little weird and had made some overtures to Norma, enough to make us want to look into this a little further.
But did Warren's workplace crush make him a killer?
The nature of the relationship was of interest to us. We're going to have a conversation with Warren Mackey.
Police investigating the murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez are questioning her former coworker, Warren Mackey. Detectives have learned that Warren may have been more than a doting colleague. They're trying to determine if he's connected to this brutal crime.
In our first encounter with Warren Mackey, there was nothing that seemed overtly suspicious or evasive or anything about him.
Detectives ask Warren about his feelings for Norma.
The impression that Warren Mackey gave us was that, his relationship with Norma Rodriguez was pretty casual. They didn't see quite as much of each other because they were no longer working with each other, but they socialized a lot.
Warren said that they were close, but it was only a close friendship. He never had romantic feelings for Norma.
He had tried to present himself to Norma as someone to lean on, someone to talk to. I'm here for you.
But investigators aren't fully buying it.
We felt that Warren liked Norma and that he wanted to make the relationship closer than it already was.
Then, Warren reveals a detail that grabs investigators' attention.
He had helped out Norma with, a couple little things around the house. And one of the things that he mentioned was that the kids had a small basketball hoop and it had somehow gotten broken and that he had fixed it. And what really kind of set off an alarm was the fact that he had fixed it with duct tape.
This is the first time in the investigation that anybody's mentioned duct tape or someone possessing duct tape.
Detectives drilled down on when Warren last saw Norma.
Warren said that he had been in the presence of Norma at the barbecue the day before the homicide. By the time things had wrapped up for the evening, it was essentially just him and Norma there, and they had just kicked back and watched TV for a while. This made him one of the last people who could have or would have seen Norma alive.
Had the former coworker made advances on Norma, then attacked her when she turned him down? Detectives ask where Warren was on the night of the murder.
Warren said that on May the 31st, close to Norma's homicide, he and his roommate and his roommate's girlfriend, they went to a nightclub in Santa Barbara till about 1:30, and then they came back to where they were living at in Oxnard. They talked for a short while and then everybody went to bed. We drove to Oxnard and we ended up talking with his roommate and her girlfriend who had gone with him for the night. And they corroborated his story as far as them going to Santa Barbara, closing the nightclub, and then getting back probably between 1:30 and 2 in the morning.
Could Warren have had time to drive to Port Hueneme and kill Norma after arriving home from a late night out with friends? Warren agrees to take a polygraph.
And he passed it, stating that he knew nothing about the homicide and he knew no one who would have killed her.
With nothing concrete tying him to the crime, police let Warren go. But before he leaves, Warren remembers Norma had problems with a man she was dating almost a year ago, named Daniel Garcia.
As the investigation continued, we started interviewing a number of people about Daniel. We found out that Daniel Garcia was Norma's boyfriend for a short period of time.
They met at a party. Norma had a strong attraction to the charming mechanic.
It was a brief but intense relationship, lasted a few months.
She told me about Daniel, that she really cared about him a lot. You know, they would do fun things together, and she always had a good time with him.
Friends tell police Daniel ended the relationship, blindsiding Norma.
Daniel had approached Norma and essentially told her that he wanted to go back with a former girlfriend. But Norma was affected quite a bit by the breakup.
Then, detectives learned that the relationship was turbulent.
There was some fraying in the relationship, and there were some conflicts. Now, that sends up some big red flags. There was one coworker who mentioned that they had witnessed a fairly heated argument between Norma and Daniel.
Daniel came in while she was working. For whatever reason it started, they had a verbal altercation that were witnessed by other people. It shows there was hostile feelings on the part of Daniel Garcia.
When detectives dig deeper into Daniel and Norma's relationship, they learn he visited Norma at home about 2 weeks before her murder.
Norma confided to her close friend she was involved with him before her death.
With a history of conflict in the relationship, did an argument turn deadly?
And this is big. Any big fight that went on, that was problematic.
Detectives are closing in on their new suspect.
This could be our guy. We have to find out if he could have committed this crime.
The investigation into the murder of single mother Norma Rodriguez is heating up. Police have a new suspect in their sights, an ex-boyfriend, Daniel Garcia.
One of the things that we learned about the relationship between Daniel and Norma was that there were some conflicts. That sends up some red flags.
Daniel agrees to come to the police station for questioning.
Norma really had no confrontations. She was very mild-mannered. The fact that she was getting into verbal altercations was unusual.
When detectives ask Daniel about his relationship with Norma, he denies any problems.
Daniel said that he wanted to go back with a former girlfriend. And so they broke up and went their separate ways. But they were still able to be somewhat friends, and he would stop by on occasion.
Detectives confront him about the heated argument with Norma at her workplace almost a year earlier.
At the time, Norma learned that he had had other relationships, and it was a problem. She was pretty upset by that.
She still had feelings for Daniel.
Had Norma attempted to restart their relationship, but instead wound up in a fight that spiraled out of control.
During his interview, Daniel told us that he saw Norma but didn't have an argument.
Detectives asked Daniel where he was the night Norma was killed.
He stated that he was at home with other family members watching TV, and then he went to bed. We talked with other family members, and that alibi was corroborated, but family members will lie for other family members. Sometimes they won't be perfectly honest with what they know, and it's extremely difficult to put weight on that.
Like previous suspects, Daniel is subjected to a polygraph.
And he passed.
With no evidence connecting the ex-lover to the crime, police let him go. It's another disappointing dead end.
After a couple of weeks of going through this, talking to countless potential witnesses, countless potential suspects, neighborhood canvasses, interviews with co-workers, polygraph examinations, it was frustrating as hell.
That was really, really hard on my family. We did not have an answer to who killed Norma. I just wanted not only justice for Norma, I was very concerned for any woman out there. We didn't know who it was. It could be someone that just passed me by. I didn't know. I just wanted him off the streets.
1 month into the investigation, the pressure continues to mount on police to solve the case.
We would get calls from the media every day. Every place we went in the community, they would ask us what was going on, and it was a lot of pressure.
Then, a surprising development. Norma's family contacts police with new information about Beatrice, Norma's coworker and friend.
It turns out that Beatrice was having an affair, and she was using Norma's house as a location for these sexual liaisons. Norma knew about it and in fact condoned it and gave her a copy of her house key.
But why hadn't Beatrice disclosed this detail to police earlier?
We confronted Beatrice with this information. Initially, huge wave of embarrassment. But she laid it out on the line. She told us, the when, the how many times.
Detectives question whether the secret rendezvous led to Norma's murder.
Now we've got other people who had, either continued access to the house. Previously, they were on the periphery of this case. Now they've moved right to the center of it.
One person detectives immediately turn to is Beatrice's husband, who also knew Norma. Had he gone after Norma for helping his wife have a secret affair?
And now, suddenly, Beatrice's husband, he's potentially in the suspect pool. We have to find out if he has an alibi and if we can corroborate it.
He apparently didn't know his wife was having an extramarital affair in Norma's house.
That was not the most comfortable thing to do from an investigative standpoint, but it still had to be done. And, the guy was crushed. He was absolutely crushed.
Detectives questioned Beatrice's husband about his whereabouts on the night of Norma's murder.
He told us that he had been at work late that evening. We talked to a lot of his coworkers. Everything about this man was genuine.
6 months into the investigation of the murder of Norma Rodriguez, detectives worry the trail has gone cold.
We're no closer to narrowing it down than we were on day one.
This case was very mind-boggling. You build up things that, wow, this is going to be great, it's coming together, and then it falls apart. As time progressed, the leads started falling off. It was tough. It was really tough.
Months turn to years. For nearly a decade, the case is at a standstill. But Norma's family doesn't give up.
Every year, we would call the police department for any updates, any new leads or anything. We kept it active. We didn't want this case forgotten.
During the entire investigation, I had the picture of Norma Rodriguez on my desk. I swore to her that I would never give up trying to find out who was responsible.
Then, 10 years to the day Norma was killed. An astonishing break in the case.
Worker with a crime lab. He had a lot of the evidence that we secured in the Norma homicide. He called me and he says, we have a match. We have a match on the DNA.
My head just exploded with 1,000 thoughts. It was just nuts.
I remember receiving the phone call and it was like winning the lottery.
It's been 10 years since 32-year-old Norma Rodriguez was found in her home, strangled and wrapped in duct tape. The case has remained unsolved, with all leads turning out to be dead ends, until now. With advancements in DNA technology, evidence collected a decade ago has finally yielded results.
At the time of the autopsy of Norma Rodriguez, there were a number of samples that were taken. Hair samples, blood samples, and fingernail clippings.
The crime lab said we have a match on the DNA, and it comes back to Warren Mackey.
Warren, Norma's friend and former coworker who had previously passed a polygraph and had an alibi for the night of the murder. At the time of the investigation, Warren had submitted his DNA and was cooperative.
Of everyone we dealt with, he was maybe the coolest customer of the bunch. it just blows you away.
Investigators start putting the pieces together about Warren Mackey.
If you're dealing with someone who's a true sociopath, they can get past the polygraph test. So now I'm thinking, all this time, were we dealing with a true sociopath and, couldn't see it?
We just went into high gear. We started unraveling everything again and doing what we needed to do.
Detectives start building a case based on forensics.
They evaluated DNA that we had gotten off of Norma's body, and we found Warren's DNA under Norma's fingernails.
The DNA evidence is a major breakthrough, but to build an airtight case, they want more.
The single biggest piece of physical evidence we had at the time was the duct tape. So it got sent off and it got tested.
The DNA that was obtained within the multiple layers of the duct tape was returned to Warren Mackey.
The odds of the DNA match being from someone else besides Warren Mackey was 1 in 810 billion. So we felt pretty confident that this was our person.
Investigators pieced together the events that led up to Norma's murder.
I think this was the classic case of a jilted suitor. And my guess is that he just got a flat-out rejection. He built up his expectations to a point where he couldn't take the fall.
Investigators believe in the early hours of May 31st, Warren Mackey entered Norma's home using keys he had stolen from her purse at the barbecue the day before.
According to Norma's son Andrew, the house was dark. Many times she would fall asleep watching TV. Maybe she fell asleep on the couch. She had no idea what was about to happen.
Detectives believe that's when Warren strangled Norma.
In his mind, she needed to die because she shouldn't have rejected him.
Then Warren wrapped her head in duct tape.
Trying to depersonalize the scene and covered her face so that he wouldn't see it.
And he ripped that duct tape, handling both ends of the duct tape, wrapped it completely around her face, and left.
Police also believe Norma's 4-year-old son, Austin, was in the next room, not realizing his mother had been murdered.
Austin didn't process, because he was a very small child, that he was too young to process what had happened. An absolute nightmare.
After Warren kills Norma, he returns to his place in nearby Oxnard, as if nothing happened.
I believe that Warren Mackey was the type of person who felt that if I can't have her, nobody can. I think this was one sick individual who had no value for life. He had no right to do what he did.
On August 28, 2003, Ventura County investigators arrest Warren Mackey for the first-degree murder of Norma Rodriguez. Warren pleads not guilty.
During the subsequent 10 years, Warren had settled down. He had gotten married, had a job, was living a very stable life. His friends, neighbors said that he was a nice, caring man.
And for him to live 10 years after that and not even have any remorse, that is not human. I can't imagine what is in a person's head to even hurt another human in that way.
Then, on January 10, 2005, as investigators prepare for trial, the DA receives an unexpected call. Warren Mackey has changed his plea to guilty.
Warren Mackey is an unexpected killer because people didn't see that inner demon, that selfishness, that narcissistic quality that would cause him to end someone else's life. People just didn't see him that way, but he was that way, and he is that way.
On March 28, 2005, Warren Mackey is sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder of Norma Rodriguez.
Oh, it was phenomenal. It was such a an elation. You felt like this weight being lifted.
At the end of the day, we achieved closure for the family, but there's never going to be complete closure.
The devastating loss of the vibrant single mother will forever be felt by her loved ones.
I think about Norma a lot. She was having a good life, and he took it away from her.
It still hurts like it happened yesterday. I miss her in my life. That wound does not heal. We just put it in the back burner. We have to live for Norma, and we have to go forward.